approach the dais. Chair, we're ready to begin.
Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Committee Rules, Privileges, Elections, Standard and Ethics. I'm Council Member Sandra Ong, Chair of the committee. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the other members of this committee who are present. Members Rowley, Krishnan, Lee, Encarnacion, Banks, Majority Leader Abreu, Deputy Speaker Williams, and Minority Leader David Carr. We are also joined by Council Members Ressler, Brewer, Wong, and Hudson. We are also joined by Speaker Julie Menon. I would also like to acknowledge the counsel to the committee, Jeff Campania, and the committee staff that worked on today's hearing. Chief Ethics Counsel Pearl Moore, Director of Public Integrity Francesca Della Vecchia, and Deputy Director of Public Integrity Alicia Vassell. Today, the committee will consider the nomination of Stephen Banks for the appointment to the position of Corporation Counsel. To start us off, I now recognize Speaker Julie Menon to make an opening statement.
Thank you so much, Chair Ung, and I really want to thank the members of the Committee on Rules, Privileges, Elections, Standards, and Ethics. Yes, it's a mouthful. We've combined the committees for convening today's public hearing on the mayor's nomination of Stephen Banks to the position of Corporation Counsel. I've known Steve Banks for many years. We served as fellow commissioners together, and we really look forward today to having a fulsome hearing. Indeed, the role of the Corporation Counsel is one of the most prestigious and powerful positions in city government. As head of the law department, the Corporation Counsel leads more than 800 attorneys conducting all of the city's legal business. In that capacity, the Corporation Counsel represents the municipal corporation of the City of New York and all of its constituent parts, including the mayor and the mayoral agencies, all of the city's other elected officials, and the City Council. The law department must represent all of these entities rigorously and ethically. I previously want to note that I served as Executive Assistant Corporation Counsel for the law department, so I have firsthand knowledge of this incredibly important agency and really respect the work that the lawyers in the law department do. One of the reasons the position of Corporation Counsel is subject to the Council's advice and consent is because, from time to time, the interests of the Council and the Mayor diverge. In such instances, we as a Council want assurances that the Corporation Counsel will not prioritize any single elected official or branch of government over the overall interests of the City of New York. As this committee considers the nomination of Steve Banks for Corporation Counsel, we are considering whether to give him our consent and trust to be the City Council's lawyer as well. And I want to emphasize that we expect the Corporation Counsel to recognize the City Council as a co-equal branch of government that has the full legislative power of the city. Just last week, in a historic vote, this body passed 17 local laws, notwithstanding the objections of former Mayor Eric Adams. We did the largest number of veto overrides ever passed at a single stated meeting, and actually more veto overrides than have occurred in the last decade alone. We as a council will continue to be proactive in our approach to both oversight and litigation. We will not be reactive but proactive. It is vital to have a law department that, in addition to all of its other responsibilities, will work with the council and support the council as we do the people's business. I really want to thank the committee staff for their hard work on this hearing today, and I look forward to hearing from the candidate and the questions from all of my colleagues. Chair, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We are also joined by Councilmember Shulman. I will now summarize the powers and duties of the Corporation Counsel before introducing the candidate. Pursuant to Section 31 and 391 of the New York City Charter, and by letter dated on January 14, 2026, Mayor Zoran Madani presented the name of Stephen Banks to the New York City Council, requesting this body's advice and consent. Section 391B of the Charter provides that the mayor shall submit a nominee for Corporation Counsel to the City Council for its advice and consent within 60 days of a vacancy. On February 12, 2026, Muriel Good-Trefont will resign from the position of Corporation Counsel. The New York City Charter designates the Corporation Counsel as the attorney and the counsel for the city and all city agencies. The Corporation Counsel, and by extension the Law Department, is granted the power to conduct all legal business of the city. Further, the Corporation Counsel has the right to bring or defend any legal action in local, state, or federal courts. The law department is comprised of approximately 850 attorneys who specialize in all areas of law necessary to conduct the legal business of the city. The law department includes specialists in a wide range of fields of litigation, land use, ethics, professional responsibility, contract and administrative law, juvenile delinquency, and legislative interpretation, just name a few. They represent the city, elected officials, and the city agencies with all legal issues they may confront. If the council gives its advice and consent, Mr. Banks will be appointed Corporation Counsel and serve an indefinite term at a salary of $253,000. Mr. Banks has joined us today. From 1981 to 2014, Mr. Banks worked at Legal Aid Society, where he was the attorney-in-chief from 2004 to 2014. From 2014 to 2021, he served as the commissioner of the New York City Department of Social Services, during which time he also led the Department of Homeless Services and Human Resources Administration. From 2022 to 2025, he led the pro bono practice at the firm of Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Ward, and Garrison. Mr. Banks is a graduate of Brown University and New York University School of Law. Before we begin, I ask that the council administer the affirmation.
Mr. Banks, please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee and in response to all council questions posed by members?
Thank you, Mr. Banks. I now recognize you to offer an opening statement.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Speaker Menem, Minority Leader Carr, Committee Chair Ung, members of the committee. Thank you very much for this opportunity to testify today about my nomination to be the Corporation Counsel for the City of New York. I have great respect for the City Council's role in this process, and I greatly appreciate the time that you, Speaker, and you, Deputy Speaker, and you, Minority Leader, and you, Committee Chair, and committee members, and many other members of the Council have already spent talking to me about your views on the importance of the Corporation Counsel serving as the chief lawyer for the city as a whole, including the Council and individual Council members. As many of you know, I spent more than 4 decades as a lawyer serving the residents of New York City in many different roles. Beginning in 1981 when I graduated from law school and throughout my professional career, I have had extraordinary opportunities to serve New Yorkers. Serving as the city's chief legal officer is the opportunity of a lifetime to provide legal leadership and representation to improve the lives of city residents and to protect the interests of a city that I love. The Office of Corporation Counsel has a storied history, and I want to build on that great tradition at a time when the city needs a strong, creative, effective law department more than ever. I have a unique perspective on the law department. For 33 years as a legal aid lawyer, including 10 years as head of the organization, I litigated against the law department. For 8 years as a commissioner, I was represented by the law department in affirmative law reform matters to provide access to rental assistance, SNAP food stamps, and Medicaid, as well as defensive cases to protect the interests of the city and its residents. Also, during my time at Legal Aid and in the years since I left city government in December 2021, I have co-counseled with the law department on matters relating to the right to shelter and access to housing. I know firsthand the key role the lawyers and professional support staff at the law department play in representing the city of New York and supporting transformational change in every community. I am honored by this historic nomination to be the first legal aid lawyer or public interest lawyer to serve as the Corporation Counsel. And I am humbled by the New York Attorney General Letitia James, Mel Hartzog, leader in the non-for-profit community, former budget director, former deputy mayor, Twyla Carter, attorney-in-chief and head of the Legal Aid Society, Brendan McGuire, former chief counsel to the mayor, former head of the Public Integrity Unit at the Southern District, and a partner at Wilmer Hale, one of the firms that sued to prevent the executive order that would have limited his firm's representation of clients. I'm proud that all of these individuals, I'm humbled by all these individuals submitting testimony in support of my nomination today. My proven track record of managing a large law firm has given me the expertise and knowledge to lead the law department effectively. At Legal Aid, I managed a staff of 1,900, including 1,100 lawyers and 800 support professionals, which is more than the law department had at full strength. With my law firm management experience, if confirmed, I look forward to working with the administration to address the law department's staffing needs. For your information, I've included my resume with my submission that describes in detail my record of successful, zealous legal advocacy on behalf of my clients and the organizations that I have led. While much attention has been paid to the well-known major cases I've handled for low-income and working New Yorkers, even more importantly, I have represented large numbers of individual clients whose lives have been harmed by city actions. This has provided me with a unique vantage point on the human impact of city policies and practices. The law department plays an essential role in addressing those impacts, and I am ready to lead that effort. Finally, my wife of 40 years, who I met on a picket line during the legal aid strike in 1982, and she's here today, she and I have been blessed over the past year with 2 grandchildren. I'm ready to take on this role at this stage of my career because I know that the Corporation Counsel and the staff of the law department will continue to make this city a better place for my grandchildren, for every New Yorker, their children, their grandchildren, and for generations to come. If confirmed, I will be a zealous advocate for New York City, its agencies, its elected officials, its residents, including all of you and this body. Thank you for your consideration of my nomination, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you for your statement. We also joined by Councilmember Vernikov, and now I recognize Speaker Menon to begin our line of questioning.
Thank you so much, Chair. So we really want to start with the overall function of the law department, because obviously it's part of the executive branch, yet it represents the city as a whole, including defending legislation that is passed by the City Council. How do you understand that dual obligation, and what principles would guide you when the executive and the legislative priorities diverge?
Well, first of all, I wanted this position because it's the lawyer for the city of New York, not the lawyer for the mayor, not the lawyer for the council. I'm the lawyer for the city of New York. I understand the important role of the city council in governance. Some of you may remember there was a time when Mayor Giuliani and Mayor Bloomberg starved the Legal Aid Society for resources, and it almost went bankrupt. I became the head of the organization when the organization was on the verge of bankruptcy. It was the city council that I worked with that helped save the organization. Every year I would come before you, and this body played a role in governance that made it possible for there to be a Legal Aid Society today. So, in short, I look forward to representing the whole city, and I will look forward to do what I have always done when I've had clients that had differing points of view. Try to reconcile those points of view and ultimately represent the point of view that is judged the proper point of view under the law. I'm not beholden to any institution, any particular elected official. My fidelity is to the rule of law and making sure that the best interests of the city of New York are served, regardless of what part of the city is advancing a particular point of view.
So during the mayor's campaign, he said he would expand the law department by hiring hundreds of new lawyers. This city council has been on record repeatedly raising the alarm about numerous city agencies, including the law department, being gutted by the last administration and this is something that we're deeply concerned about. So how many lawyers do you plan to hire? What will they do? What services will they provide? And lastly, how do you reconcile that with the budget prediction that the administration laid out with a $12 billion budget deficit and the mayor ordering all agencies to identify cost savings within 45 days?
Let me start with the first part of that question, the last part of that question first. I've worked in economic hard times. As I described, I led the Legal Aid Society out of near bankruptcy to fiscal health. So I know how to manage a budget, I know how to look for cost savings, and I know how to make sure that the agency that I'm running performs as it should. The mayor certainly has said very publicly that he wants to restore staffing at the law department to address the fact that it had been hollowed out. And I look forward to working with the mayor and working, frankly, with the council to address the staffing needs there. But I also have experience at looking at efficiencies. And I also have looked at the areas where I think more can be done. Judgment and claims is one of those areas. If you look at the continued payouts by the city, that is affecting the city budget. And one thing that I think is really important to focus on is risk mitigation. That's a role that the law department can play to evaluate what are the lawsuits being brought against the city, what are the causes of action that are being asserted, which ones are being brought over and over again. So where can we look for savings within our own house to help address the fundamental part of your question, which is how are we going to have enough staff to do our jobs? Second part of your question is like, what are we going to do if we get more staff? I think that there are a number of key areas that are important to make sure that we have enough staff in-house to perform the basic functions, first and foremost. When you look at those numbers, you can see over the last several years that the headcount has been decreased significantly. That's affected every part of the office. So first principle is to look at where in the office additional staffing is needed. Second principle is what are the functions that the city needs at this historical moment? Affirmative litigation is a critical need. I know from your experience in the law department that you know what the law department lawyers can do on the front lines when the interests of the city are at stake. So protecting the city and having enough lawyers to do that is essential. Ensuring that the residents of the city get the full force of the law. Recently, as co-counsel to the law department, we represented the Pinnacle tenants in an action. And there are people all over the city who need that kind of strong law department response to protect their rights. Having said all that, I've worked with the council over many, many years in many different roles. I want to hear you. I want to understand what you think we could be doing better and where we could be expanding our efforts.
Okay, great. Thank you. So moving on to a couple other issues that are deeply, deeply important and troubling to the council. At least 16 people have died since last week's winter storm, and we are hearing different reports about the levels of interactions that they have had with the Department of Homeless Services or other city services. And reports said that at least 7 of the 16 individuals have had some contact with DHS. So we want to really understand what plans do you have, if you are the Corporation Counsel, to advise the mayor on preventing future deaths from exposure for those individuals experiencing homelessness, and if so, what are those plans?
I mean, as you know, I've spent most of my professional life trying to help people experiencing homelessness in this city. A single death is just tragic. I experienced deaths on the street when I was the Commissioner of Social Services. And my heart goes out to the loved ones of those who've lost their life, and also to the frontline workers who are working every day to try and bring people inside. That's very hard work. I've done it myself. And I feel for them because I know how I felt when I was the commissioner when a single person lost their life. I think what I have seen, and as you know, I'm not in the role now, but what I have seen is exactly what should be happening, which is adhering to the state law to evaluate people, bring them inside when the state law permits people to be brought inside, continually to engage people. The people I have represented for years on the streets have fallen through every social safety net. They've lost trust with every system that we have, and the only way to get them back on a pathway to come inside is constant engagement. And that's what I see happening right now, redoubling efforts 24/7 to engage people and bring them inside. At the end of the day, though, you need options. And I know in your district recently, you announced the opening of just exactly the kind of options that in my personal experience, people will come inside if you offer it. And my hat goes off to you for welcoming that type of resource in your community. And we've got to do more of that. While I'm not going to be a policymaker in the social services area, I do have experience, and I know that the kinds of solutions that you have welcomed in your district are exactly the kind of solutions that we need citywide.
So one follow-up on that. So many individuals experiencing homelessness are mentally ill and may not have the true capacity to make decisions for their own well-being and protection. So as Corporation Counsel, would you advise the mayor that when there are extreme weather conditions, as there were the last couple of weeks, that the city can, in the interest of health and safety, relocate those individuals to shelters, treatment facilities, and if not, then what would the administration's policy be in general?
I think the state law doesn't permit that kind of blanket approach. It requires an individualized evaluation. And that is exactly what I see being implemented right now. There have been nurses deployed to constantly be evaluating people. There have been people removed from the street when they do meet the state standard that you described. But it is hard work. It requires constant engagement, and it requires the kind of resources that you've welcomed in your district. And although, again, I'm not a policymaker in this area, I'm going to continue to urge that kind of response to apply the law on an individualized evaluation basis to help human beings come in from the street and be safe. That requires nursing evaluations, that requires clinical evaluations, and that's what I see is going on right now at, frankly, an extraordinarily high level.
Okay. One thing that I want to move on to is the importance of the law department proactively giving the council their legal opinion on bills. We recently had a situation, now we know we have the bill sponsor here, Councilmember Nurse, where the law department did not provide all of the legal opinions to a bill that the council, COPA, ended up passing in December, and only weeks after the fact. And I know you are not Corporation Counsel, so of course we are not blaming you. What we want to do is seek your commitment that moving forward that does not happen again, because it put the council in a very difficult situation where after the bill passes, we are hearing red flags from the law department. So to be clear, we cannot have that happen again, and we need your commitment that moving forward that would not happen again.
You have my commitment. I spoke to Councilmember Nurse about this just actually yesterday, and we talked about ways forward to try to move forward. I also want to, even though I'm not the head of the law department, just say a word about the lawyers at the law department. There are frequently, shall I say, institutional issues that impact very dedicated people's ability to do the job that they want to do. I encountered that when I took over the Legal Aid Society, that there were terrific lawyers there who couldn't do what they thought was the best thing to do for their clients, and I dedicated myself to making it possible for those lawyers to do that which they thought was in the interest of their clients. So going forward, same lawyers at the law department, they will be working on the same directional that you want them to be working in, which is to engage early,
Right.
And ensure that we have a back and forth on the laws. I know you're a lawyer, you worked at the law department. I have great respect for you. I know you've expressed our long working relationship, but we want to early discuss bills with you so at the end of the day you get the right bill. I wouldn't blame the lawyers, I would always blame institutions, because human
Yeah,
beings are great
and
people.
thank you.
Institutions are not always so great.
Yeah, to be clear, I have great respect for my former colleagues at the law department. We're not blaming the lawyers, we're really blaming the process, which is, I think there needs to be tight controls and a process set up. So not for every single bill, if it's a straight up reporting bill that doesn't raise any legal issues, but for more complicated substantive bills, there has to be that early read from the law department. So we need to put in tighter processes and controls in place.
You're right. I think we will have a great working relationship with you and your team, because we both have the same perspective, which is the best bills come from early engagement, give and take, to ensure that the language is drafted to achieve what you want it to achieve within the confines of what the law permits. So I think we're going to have a great working relationship.
I want to move on to a question I have about Timothy Pearson. Timothy Pearson is obviously a former top aide to Mayor Adams, ex-NYPD official, now facing multiple lawsuits, whose defense has cost the city more than $620,000 in public funds through outside counsel, a decision that obviously drew controversy and even contributed to the resignation of the prior corporation counsel. Can you explain whether the law department is still defending Mr. Pearson in these civil suits? What is the current status of the representation, and how would you justify such significant city resources in this context?
So I'm going to make the following commitment to you, which is to say the standard for representation is whether or not the conduct was in the scope, whether or not there are violations of rules and regulations. What I did when I became head of the Legal Aid Society, what I did when I became head of the Department of Social Services, I reviewed all the pending cases to see whether the cases were aligned with where I thought they should be. Again, from the perspective that I raised earlier, which is that the lawyers handling the cases are handling them within the context of our prior administration. So it's not about the lawyers, it's about what should the position be, but I will give you a commitment that I will be reviewing that kind of
So
representation.
he still is being, I just want to understand, is he still is being represented by the law department?
There are, I don't have the full facts, but from what I understand, there are still issues going on in his case, but I will, as part of my review it, and I will follow up with you.
Yeah, I would just ask if you follow up, because I have strong objections to that, and I believe most of the colleagues here would have strong objections to that is not in the scope of employment. And so I would like to get an update on that and recommend that the law department cease representing Mr. Pearson.
I'm guessing that as this hearing proceeds, there'll be a number of questions where I'm going to say the same thing. I want to take a look at it.
Understood.
And I'll follow up with you.
Understood. Okay, I have a few more questions. I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues. So I want to talk about city FEPs, because the council, in response to skyrocketing rents and exploding crisis of homelessness in 2023, passed 4 laws around city FEPs. And as we know, Mayor Adams vetoed the laws, council overrode the vetoes, then Mayor Adams refused to enforce the laws. Legal Aid Society, which you led for so many years, sued the mayor to compel implementation, and the council joined Legal Aid in that litigation. Now, you recently requested an adjournment from the court on the litigation. Can you explain your thinking of this case, and what do you intend to do moving forward?
Sure. I have to just start with, I was, I guess, the parent of City FEPs. When I was the Commissioner of Social Services, we created the program, and I know how important it is to providing stability to families and individuals. I also know how important it is to operate the program within the fiscal constraints of the city, and that's how I approached it when I was a commissioner. The mayor has said he wants to settle this case, and the request for additional time is to negotiate with the city council's lawyers, with the Legal Aid Society's lawyers, to come to a resolution that recognizes the importance of the program, including the legislation that this council enacted in the context of the fiscal challenges that we have. I believe, and I believe this from the way I operated the program, that we can do 2 things at once: help individuals in dire need, and at the same time operate the program within the fiscal constraints that we have. But those will be issues that we're going to work out through the settlement, and I'm committed to carry out what I think the council wants and what I know the mayor wants, which is to settle this case and not keep litigating it.
Well, so will the law department drop the appeal?
That, I think when we get to the end of a settlement, there won't be an appeal anymore.
Okay, so you'll come back to us then in terms of the plan on the settlement, I assume, is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely, and I apologize if I sound cagey. I'm just concerned about negotiating the matter in public rather than
Understood.
joining issue with you have great lawyers, outside counsel, and your internal lawyers.
Understood.
Legal Aid Society is very aggressive. I'm sure we'll come to a good resolution.
So I want to move on to the September 11th files. You've got the 25th anniversary of 9/11 coming up. You have, unfortunately, thousands of first responders and residents who died of cancer because the federal EPA said the air was safe to breathe. We know the city, back then at the time of 9/11, may have had some information or knowledge. Many of us have been trying for years to get these 9/11 files released. What is your view of that, and what will your view be as Corporation Counsel on the release of these files?
This is very personal to me. I'm not going to let my personal views color my legal conclusions, but I believe I should tell you what my personal experience has been. My daughter was one of the fifth graders at the school at the corner of Greenwich and Chambers who was evacuated out of the building by the teachers when the towers fell in a cloud of dust and debris. As a parent, I didn't know where she was. I was searching for her. She was safe, but she had asthma as a result of her exposure to the air down there. Our offices at the Legal Aid Society at the time were at 90 Church Street, just across from where the towers had stood, and we were unable to return to them. After the tragic events of that day, my colleagues and I at Legal Aid provided legal assistance to people who had lost their jobs and their homes at the city's Disaster Relief Center at 80 Center Street. So I'm going to conduct a full review of what records we have, what records have been discovered, if any, what records can and should be released. I know I will be testifying before you, at least at preliminary budget and executive budget, if not at other occasions, and I will be accountable for what I'm saying today, which is we are going to review, under my watch, we're going to review what records there are and release what records can be released.
Okay, I just want to say one more thing on that. I mean, as someone who spent a decade of my life working on issues regarding 9/11, I can't say strongly enough that if the city was liable for misleading the public and telling everyone, backing what the EPA said, that the air was safe to breathe, and those of us, like myself and others, and my mother died of a 9/11 related cancer, she stayed downtown. It's just shameful that the city of New York has blocked the release of these files, so I'm urging you to really to look at this, and I know you will, with fresh eyes, because it is now 25 years that these files have been blocked, and we really need to have them released for transparency, for accountability, and for all the families that lost loved ones. And so these things don't happen again, so I feel very strongly about it. Last question before I turn it over to the chair. Want to get a sense of your view and how you will be advising the mayor on issues surrounding, for example, what happened at Park East Synagogue around protesting, and how are you going to balance, obviously, First Amendment rights to free speech and to protest with some of what we've seen happen, for example, Park East Synagogue or Kew Gardens? How are you going to strike that balance? What is your view, and how will you be advising the mayor, as we have a number of pieces of legislation that we're going to be looking at in that regard?
Right. This also is personal to me. My wife and I belong to Congregation Beth Elohim in Garfield and 8th Avenue in Brooklyn. You may know that the steps of the synagogue were defaced with graffiti. And so I have a very personal experience of what led you to introduce the legislation that you've introduced. I also understand that we can hold two values at the same time: First Amendment rights and the right to freely worship. And the Law Department will review all the pieces of legislation, and along the lines of what we discussed early in the hearing, provide enough time to engage, depending on what the outcome is, to go in the right direction to ensure that both of those rights are embraced. but I can commit to you, we will fully review the legislation. There's legislation at the state, there's legislation here, so that the city can have a path forward to hold both of these values at the same time.
I think one of the things that will be important to note with the legislation that we have proposed at the city level is that the legislation is crafted to direct the NYPD to create the perimeter zones. The legislation doesn't penalize protests. It says nothing about penalties around protests. On the contrary, what it does is direct the NYPD around perimeter zones around all houses of worship and schools. So to try to strike that balance that we know is at the heart of the issue.
Understood. And I'll look forward to engaging more as we make that review.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Speaker. We also been joined by Council members Caban, Nurse, and Santos Sosa. I will now start my line of questioning, and after that, it will be other members of the committee, followed by council members who are not part of this committee. So good afternoon again.
Good afternoon.
Right now, the current Corporation Counsel is Muriel Good-Trufant, and your appointment is subject to the advice and consent of the Council. But since being nominated, you have been participated in litigation on behalf of the Law Department. What is your current title with respect to the legal work you've been doing on city matters?
I have been serving pro bono as pro bono counsel to the Law Department. I wanted to make sure I could hit the ground running and to be able to work with the Law Department lawyers, and given the privilege issues that pertain to virtually everything the Law Department does, leadership in the Law Department and I struck that is the best way to do that. I am pro bono counsel to the City of New York, to the Law Department, not to the mayor, just to make that clear. And in that role, for example, I appeared on behalf of the City of New York in the Pinnacle proceeding as co-counsel. This is not the first time I've been co-counsel to the City of New York. I was co-counsel to the City of New York in the litigation to address Governor Abbott's Texas busing scheme, in which he used weaponized the interstate transportation of people to force a change in national immigration policies. I joined with the Law Department in that litigation with the same type of pro bono agreement that I have currently with the Law Department.
Thank you. Did anyone advise you to take on this role before your appointment?
Apologies.
Did anyone advise you to take on this role before the appointment?
No, I wanted to take on this role so that I could be able to not, at the moment of confirmation, start to understand the work of the Law Department. We live in a world which is very complicated. We have seen things going on across our country. I wanted to make sure that I am ready to serve if you should confirm me without a period of transition to have to learn how to serve. So I wanted to take on the role at the beginning.
Did anyone in the mayor's office ever indicate to you that they would direct the Law Department to retain you in this manner?
Nobody in the mayor's office, to my knowledge, directed the Law Department to do that. It was entirely through discussions with the Corporation Counsel. I should have said this before, I have great respect for Muriel Good-Trufant. We have known each other since she began as Assistant Corporation Counsel in the 1990s. She and I were on other side of a very hard-fought litigation. Great respect for her. We go back so far that even one night when the city couldn't meet a filing deadline, she served me with legal papers when I was out on a date night with my wife. So we do go back very, very far. Also, I have great respect for her. She took a historic stance in not representing the mayor in the dispute regarding opening the ICE office in Rikers Island. I think that was a historic moment that a corporation counsel declined to represent the mayor. You know, I hope I will follow in those footsteps. So when taking on this role, it was in no way looking to supplant her role, but to actually learn from her between January 1st and January 12th when she leaves.
Are you aware of any other corporation counsel who was a Law Department attorney who took on such a role to familiarize themselves with the office operations before being appointed?
Since advice and consent has existed, Georgia Pisana was already at the law department.
Okay.
And Mira Gutschafont was already at the law department. Sylvia Hines-Radix, Judge Radix, did not take on that role, but she took on the role of being the corporation counsel in a very different historical moment than this one.
Thank you. I think we talked about this, but we're going to get more into it. The law department attorneys frequently represent the counsel in litigation. They often represent that they are providing legal advice to the counsel during the bill drafting process. In both instances, the law department comes to possession of sensitive information that may harm the counsel's interests if publicly disclosed or if used against the counsel in a court proceeding. Do law department attorneys have an ethical obligation to maintain attorney-client privilege and confidentiality with respect to information that they receive from the counsel in the course of providing legal advice to the counsel?
Yes, I understand that that is how law department lawyers view the role, that consistent with professional responsibility, that they provide confidential advice to the counsel. Other lawyers provide confidential advice to the mayor. And at the end of the day, the corporation counsel and the law department's role is to do what's in the best interest of the city overall. But the situation that I think is behind your question, do the lawyers divulge to the other, that's not the way the law department approaches it. And I'm confident that that's how the lawyers in the units that work with the counsel on legislation view their role in exactly the way I've described it.
During the bill drafting and negotiation process, what obligation, if any, do the law department attorneys have to disclose whether they're representing the counsel or the administration?
I want to make sure that I'm hearing your question correctly. The lawyers who are working with the counsel on bill drafting are providing confidential advice to the counsel. The lawyers that are working with the mayor's side in terms of what the mayor's side would like to see come out of negotiations are working as the lawyers for the mayor's side. The corporation counsel has an obligation to be the lawyers for the entire city. So I think what you're getting is there confidentiality? Even if necessary, there are ethical screens put in place as well. But the tradition of the law department is to maintain the kind of confidentiality that you want us to.
So even without disclosure, even without basically without disclosing whether they're representing the council or the mayor, the administration, you're saying that it's their obligation, ethical obligation, to represent either us, the council, or the administration, that they would do the ethical obligations, is what you're saying.
And I understand in prior confirmation hearings, there's been a question about what kind of training and what kind of reinforcement is done. And I know Muriel at her confirmation hearing agreed to make sure that that process is maintained, and I will continue that. I think she was very committed to that, and I will continue that commitment.
Will you commit that in any proceeding adverse to the council, the law department will not use any document or information received from the council in the course of representing or advising the council?
If I'm following you correctly, if we're advising you confidentially and you give us a confidential document, could we use it in litigation against you? I don't think a lawyer can do that.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. And would you further commit that you would not disclose any such information to third party, including any other client, without express consent of the council unless directed by court of law?
I think that, again, it's the same question. You know, lawyers in many different situations have multiple clients. The unique role of the law department here enables us to have lawyers have confidential discussions with you, and other lawyers have confidential discussions with the mayor's side. And that's, I think, a very important ethical approach to these situations.
Thank you. And this will be a last question regarding this ethical questions.
It's a very important area. You could ask me as many as you feel needed. I'm happy to answer them.
In the context of the litigation, the law department has previously demanded that the council agrees to the stays of enforcement of local law that the mayor opposed. In our pre-hearing questions, you were asked to commit, not requesting the council agree to such a stay of enforcement in the absence of a court order. And then you responded that you hope you would never encounter a dispute that would lead to such a question. And as officers of the court, the law department attorneys cannot engage in actions that conflict with court orders. But that didn't answer the question of what we are asking, which is, will you commit that in the absence of a court order, you will not seek a stay of enforcement of a local law based solely on the mayor's objection to the local law, but instead you would always get prior approval from the council?
There are a number of parts to that question, if I could,
Yes.
if I could parse them slightly.
Sure.
Look, I've been a litigator for many years, and often getting consent to a temporary restraining order is in everybody's interest because it avoids protracted litigation. I would urge you not to ask me to never seek a temporary restraining order if it was in the best interest of the city overall. I might be seeking a temporary restraining order on behalf of the council, or I might be seeking a temporary restraining order on behalf of an individual council member. And so to have a blanket rule to not seek such relief or request consent to such relief in order to avoid protracted litigation, I think would potentially put the council itself and council members in an untenable position in litigation. So I'm looking at this as just a litigator. I know there's a whole history here, and you're looking at it from an institutional perspective. I'm simply looking at it, if I represent the council or you, aren't I going to want to ask an opposing party to consent to a temporary restraining order to benefit the council's position or an individual council member's position if it's that kind of litigation? So I would urge all of us to look at these situations as, how do we get the best result for the client? And the client could be you, the client could be the mayor, the client could be an individual member. But I'm always going to want to try to avoid protracted litigation, and consenting to a temporary restraining order frequently is the best way to do that. When I represented individual clients against the city, I would always ask the city to consent to a temporary restraining order as a way of avoiding protracted litigation that could harm my clients. So I would urge us not to limit the tools that we have in all sorts of litigation contexts to try to do what's best for the whole city. I understand the context is very contentious relationships with the last administration. I'm not in the last administration. I wouldn't have been able to serve in it, I think.
Thank you. Moving on to different line of questioning. So during our August 2024 hearing on the nomination of Randy Mastro for the Rural Corporation Council, Mr. Mastro opined that if a mayor believes a duly enacted local law is unlawful, he should ask the law department to seek judicial intervention before the effective date of such a law. Do you agree that in the absence of such judicial intervention, the mayor has the obligation to enforce the duly enacted laws of the city?
I mean, as a general matter, the mayor has the obligation to enforce the duly enacted laws of the city. Sometimes, however, the ability to get to court before something happens is limited. I would, generally speaking, and this was my experience as a litigator, get into the court before something goes into effect, because the likelihood of getting relief is much higher if it's before the thing that you're trying to stop has happened. On the other hand, sometimes if that happens and you go to court before something happens, the court will say, it's not ripe yet for litigation. You have to come back later. So the general approach that I think that I'm understanding you're asking about is, am I going to seek a judicial opinion if there's a difference of opinion between the council and I'm representing the mayor? I think that's the best practice. But in reality, sometimes the litigation may be that you can't get the relief before something has already gone into effect, or a court might say, wait till it goes into effect, come back. But I understand the principle, which is, am I going to just sit and assume that you'll sue first? As I said in answer to an earlier question that I know the speaker raised, I want to avoid all those situations. I know that my reputation is one of being a hard-charging litigator, but I actually think my best work has been trying to settle matters and avoiding disputes. I get that where you're coming from, well, what if a dispute happens? What are you going to do? I would want to get into court before something happened. That's been my way of practicing law. On the other hand, sometimes the court will say, come back after it's happened.
Do you acknowledge that a charter requires the mayor to submit his objections to the council in writing, and merely stamping veto on a bill is not a statement of objections?
I think it's certainly the best practice to say a reason why something is either unlawful or not doable. I think I certainly, if I serve as corporation counsel, believe that I have an obligation to communicate about whether something's lawful or unlawful. And I will be held to that representation that I'm making to you.
Will you commit that as a corporation counsel, if you agree with the mayor that proposed local law adopted by the council is unlawful, and he decides to veto such a proposed local law, that you will advise the mayor to state all legal infirmities in writing in the statement of objections that he is required to submit to the council pursuant to Section 37 of the Charter?
Look, I have to answer the question slightly differently than you're asking it. I've always believed as a lawyer that I have to adhere to the rules of professional conduct. That was frankly one of the reasons why I left Paul Weiss, because I thought that the President's executive order would have prevented me from adhering to the rules of professional conduct as I saw them. I think committing to first of all, I can't even commit if I can't reveal whether someone's asked me for advice, and I can't reveal what that advice is going to be. That is not permissible under the rules. If you're asking me what I think the best practice is and what I will do personally, I can make that commitment. But in terms of what I would actually advise confidentially a mayor to do or not, I think the rules of professional conduct do limit my ability to say whether I'm asked such a question and how I would answer it. But I can commit to you how I will conduct myself.
I think the commitment, I think my question is more about the commitment to stay in writing instead of just a simple, veto message in writing, the statement of the objections. That is, I think, the commitment we're asking for.
I think that's the best practice. I agree with you. I'm only reacting to what I may or may not advise the mayor, should he so ask me.
Sure, okay. And will you further commit that you will not advise the mayor to claim any legal infirmity in a veto message that was not disclosed to the council during the bill negotiation process?
I think that really goes to the question that the speaker asked me earlier. The bill negotiation process has to work so we all know what the issues are. So I don't believe if it works the way I intend to have it work, this will be a non-issue. So I think the answer is yes to your question, because it should never come up.
But yes, if it does.
Should never come up.
And to my last question, which is a little bit different from my last couple of questions. ICE deployments across the country have provoked fear and outrage. The aggressive tactics being used by these mass agents have resulted in inhumane detentions, the deprivation of civil rights, and the taking of life, such as the shooting of Alex Preddy by ICE agents. ICE deployments detentions have been reported across New York City, even though we are in a sanctuary city. What will you do as the head of the law department to protect New York's status as a sanctuary city and to protect the rights of all New Yorkers against the administration's aggressive immigration plans?
Let me start off by saying what we see occurring across the country, Minneapolis most recently, is just heartbreaking. It's an outrage. As a lawyer who has always believed in the rule of law, what we're seeing happening, this is not who we are. And as you say, though, it's not just what's happening in other cities. We do see our residents being snatched off the street, playing by the rules, going to their hearings, and being seized and separated from their families. This is not who we are. One of the reasons why I want to lead the law department is to be able to play a role in addressing and protecting our city from these kinds of practices. I've spent a lot of my professional life protecting New Yorkers from unlawful exercises of government power. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to have the pro bono arrangement with the law department so that I could be ready to protect New Yorkers. Having said that, I've fought and won against a lot of different mayors, including Rudy Giuliani. And one thing I've learned is don't tell them how you're going to fight back and provide them a roadmap of what we're going to do. But I can assure you we will increase our fight back for what's happening to New Yorkers and prevent the kind of things that have happened in other cities.
Thank you. That is all for my questions. Right now, actually, we're going to take a brief pause in the questioning and answer section of this hearing. We're going to move really quickly to the public testimony by our Attorney General. Thank you. I just want to remind everybody that public testimony is 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And thank you. It was on. It's on? Yes. And thank you, Madam Speaker. And it's great to be back in City Hall as the council works to nominate and support an individual who I've known for a very long time. As a former city council member in Brooklyn, I worked with Steve to address the issues of individuals who are facing eviction. I work with Steve on behalf of individuals who unfortunately lost their food stamps and public assistance. I work with Steve with regards to individuals in homeless shelters. I work with Steve in regards to the Bedford Atlantic Armory, which is still an issue, and hopefully we can transform that armory going forward. And so I come before you today in support of his nomination, given his decades of commitment to public service. He embodies the law as a force for common good for all of us, and for his entire career, no matter the stakes or personal consequence, he has pursued justice for the most vulnerable in the city. As I arrived, I heard questions with respect to our commitment to stand up and fight an administration which is chaotic, cruel, and corrupt. And I look forward to working with the City Council as well as Corp Council as we coordinate our efforts to protect the interests of New York City as well as New York State. It is so critically important that all of you understand what is at stake. And each and every day in my office, there is a new, unlawful, illegal, unconstitutional executive order that we have to respond to, resulting in the loss of billions of dollars. We just responded to the Gateway Tunnel, as you know, with New Jersey's Attorney General. There's a possibility of a loss of over 1,000 jobs. Second Avenue Tunnel, the list goes on. And they are also requesting and demanding our data. And as you know, we've stood up. And so it's really critically important that we have a partner in Corporation Counsel, that we work with Corporation Counsel to respond to all of the challenges that we are facing. He has over 30 years at the Legal Aid Society, and as a proud graduate of the Legal Aid Society, and as someone who served in that capacity for a long time, it's an honor and a privilege to support the nomination of someone who believes in thinking about others before he thinks about himself. He has an exceptional work habit, and he is always there for the call. He spearheaded the organization's efforts to deliver justice in every borough, providing free legal representation to low-income individuals, partnering directly with community groups, and advancing lasting systemic change. And he has fearlessly challenged injustice whenever it rears its ugly head. And the wealth of knowledge that he has acquired, not only in this administration, but the previous administration, deems him worthy of this nomination. And that's why I took time out of my very busy schedule to come before you today, and also to say hello to all of you. I know I'm working with a number of you on a number of initiatives in your respective districts, and I look forward to continuing to do that along with my partner in the struggle, Corporation Counsel. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General. And now back to the questions. I'd like to turn it over to our Deputy Speaker Williams. Where did she go? Oh, she's up there.
Thank you. I guess we can all go home now. The Attorney General has spoken. In all seriousness, I know I asked you this question before, but I have one question, but it's my favorite topic. So according to a comptroller's report in 2024, there were 13,000 claims. The city paid close to $2 billion in litigation and settlements. How do you plan to address the growing volume and cost of these litigations and settlements against the city, while also ensuring that underlying systemic issues that are driving these lawsuits are identified and prevented?
Thank you for that question. I'm glad we had an opportunity to talk about it the other day. This really gets to what the speaker asked me about, which is how are we going to manage our legal affairs, which has sort of two parts to it. Enough staff to manage our legal affairs and manage our legal affairs so that we have control over certain of the costs that are within our ability to control. You are focused on judgment and claims. I am going to be focused on judgment and claims. And this is certainly an area in which risk mitigation is what lawyers do in the paying client world. Risk mitigation is what the law department has a new unit that it has been working in this area. I am looking forward to enhancing our work in that area and with the team in the law department that is looking at risk mitigation. And I will keep you informed of our efforts, but I completely understand your concern about lawsuits being brought, and it's not that the lawyers who bring the lawsuits, it's why the lawsuits need to be brought, and we need to do a thorough review of the kinds of things that are giving rise to city liability, and ultimately, as I said in my own testimony, the harm that city policies do cause to New Yorkers. So you have my commitment that that's going to be an area I'm going to look into.
Thank you.
And I know I have a partner with the Attorney General in all those matters, too.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, that's it. We also been joined by Councilman Primera Sanchez. I'd like now to turn it over to our Majority Leader, Abreu.
Thank you, Counselor, for showing up before the Council today. Your predecessors have argued in court filings that a plaintiff challenging the validity of a local law must meet the heavy burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the law suffers wholesale constitutional impairment. Your predecessors have also argued that the Court of Appeals requires the plaintiffs to establish that it is impossible to reconcile the local law and the state constitution, and that, quote, where reasonable doubt exists, the law must be upheld, unquote. Do you agree with this standard, and will you apply it when advising the mayor on whether a duly enacted law is illegal?
I mean, there is a presumption of validity of local legislative enactments, and there is that second department decision that you're referring to that essentially says that it may only be overcome by proof that an enactment is unconstitutional beyond a reasonable doubt. So that's the second department's evaluation of what the law says. The general standard, of course, doesn't, supplant careful case-by-case analysis required for disputes concerning core powers of elected officials, whether it's the council, the controller, or the mayor. But I understand what that decision says, and that's going to certainly be a guide in evaluating it. But I think the presumption of validity is part of it, but there still needs to be a case-by-case analysis.
And my last question, pursuant to Section 24 of the New York State Executive Law, the mayor may issue an emergency executive order to suspend a local law. Do you believe the use of this power must be rare, narrowly tailored, limited in time span, and that such power should never be used when the disaster in question could be resolved using the day-to-day tools of city government, like rulemaking and legislation?
That's a great yes or no question. Yes, I agree with that description. By way of example, I obviously manage the Department of Social Services through the COVID crisis, needed to issue emergency relief for people, and that was done because there was an emergency declaration because of that public health crisis. In contrast, there are some other executive orders. There are two that are subject of the current mayors having issued new executive orders. One relates to conditions of the Board of Corrections standards for conditions on Rikers Island, where essentially an emergency order was in place for the entire 4 years of the last administration. And one of the things that we have done, the law department drafted an order that the mayor signed to require a compliance plan to come into compliance with something that's been suspended, the Board of Corrections standards, for 4 years. Same thing with various standards for shelters, which have been suspended for 3 years. Your description of when an emergency should be declared and the duration is important. It's not really the duration. The issue is whether or not there's still an emergency and it affects the public health and public safety. And so your question is exactly on point.
So is it fair to say that the past administration broadly, perhaps too broadly, uses emergency powers, in your view?
Well, I think in those two areas, using emergency orders to suspend the Board of Corrections standards for 4 years doesn't make sense.
Thank you.
Post September 11th, post Sandy, there were certainly things that required an executive action to suspend various rules given those particular crises.
Thank you very much.
Can I give you a hug?
I'd now like to turn it over to the Minority Leader Carr.
Thank you so much, Chair. Commissioner, always good to see you. You indicated earlier that some of your best work has been in avoiding disputes. I fear that you may have allowed your best work to be overshadowed over the course of your career. But you've been involved in so many important legal struggles. I'd like to talk to you about a couple of them that are ongoing right now. With respect to sanctuary cities, do you believe that it is a violation of the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution for a state or local jurisdiction to ignore a detainer request when somebody's been in contact with the criminal justice system?
Well, this is under litigation currently, in which the federal government is attempting to obtain a declaration in the Eastern District that New York's sanctuary city laws are unlawful. I don't agree with that legal claim. The sanctuary cities laws were adopted by the council, signed into law by the mayor, and I think the sanctuary city laws strike the right balance between the 10th Amendment rights that the states have, and by derivation of that, the localities, to not be commandeered into implementing federal policies. That's a core concept of what it means to be a state, what it means to be a municipality within the state. And I think the council is well within its powers to enact that law and the mayor to sign it. So I know you and I have interacted with each other over many years, and I know we will agree to disagree on certain things, but I will be a vigorous advocate to continue to defend that law that was duly enacted by the council, because I do think it strikes the right balance.
But the federal immigration laws are duly enacted by Congress, right? And it's enumerated power of the federal government to enforce our immigration system, whether we agree with it or not. Is it really hijacking or commandeering local resources simply by sharing information?
I believe it is. I believe it is. And that is certainly a live issue in litigation. I understand we disagree on that. But I want to, in full transparency, say I'm going to work to continue to defend the law that was enacted by the council. My own view at the time, and continues to be, that the sanctuary laws make us safer and stronger as a city, so people don't live in the shadows, and so that we can build on the great strength of the city, which is its diversity. But I do think the council struck the right balance between the federal law and local law in enacting that particular provision.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to say this is akin to full faith and credit at the state level, right? There's going to be states that engage in law enforcement actions that New York may not subscribe to, may even disapprove of, right? But we would still have to honor an extradition request from those states. So why do states get that privilege, but the federal government does not? I understand I'm talking about two different provisions of the Constitution here, but they're cousins in this matter.
I think they're quite distant cousins, actually. But in the litigation, we're going to continue to vigorously defend the city. I know we're going to agree to disagree on that one, but I do think as the chief legal officer in the city, if I am confirmed, that it's my obligation to defend that law that was duly enacted, which I think was enacted for the right reasons.
And so this last topic area is with respect to right to shelter. Obviously, this became a big issue over the last several years. You've been a key figure in that discussion over the last several decades. And the right to shelter, while it exists in our New York State Constitution, was never defined statutorily as those same provisions call for. The City of New York consented in the Callahan case to certain provision of services, and that's been amended over the years. But the reality is there's no compulsion for us to do that other than the consent decree. And that consent decree was, I think, stretched beyond recognition in the migrant crisis when we were forced to shelter thousands of people who had literally just arrived here, and at the cost of $4 billion a year for 3 years on average. That's a big chunk of change, particularly as we're facing a $12 billion deficit now. What's your view on this? Do you think the city has wiggle room to revisit this issue in order to make sure that we don't have to deal with those kinds of financial burdens again?
Well, first and foremost, the right to shelter is why, despite our challenges with our streets in this city, our streets don't look like the streets of other cities in the country. The vast majority of people experiencing homelessness in our city are inside. The large numbers of people experiencing homelessness in other cities are on the streets. And it's because of the right to shelter that is the result in terms of the human beings involved, but also in terms of our city. The question of where the right to shelter comes from, it comes from Article 17 of the New York State Constitution. The drafters of that provision drafted it because it was in the midst of the Great Depression, and they saw shanty towns in Central Park and along the Hudson and East Rivers, and they said, you can read what they said this shouldn't be, and that's where Article 17 comes from. It's true that in the single adult men's case there was a settlement, but in the family's case, actually the Appellate Division First Department reached the question of whether or not the state constitution required the provision of shelter, and it would have been possible for the court to say, well, if we provide it to single men, we should provide it to families with children, but the court went further and said, actually, under Article 17, there's an obligation to provide shelter. So that's an actual judicial ruling. But to the core of your question, I think the issue about what type of shelter should be provided to asylum seekers who come from the city, to the city, has been resolved by the March 2024 court order, which defines eligibility for obtaining shelter, the process for getting shelter, and the city's efforts and programs to reconnect people to the community so they don't continue to remain in shelter. And that order struck a balance between the real key core value of the right to shelter, which is to keep people off the streets and preserve human life, and at the same time address the situation the city was confronted with. So I think this has been resolved judicially.
I think in closing, I just want to say that, obviously you referenced the origins of the provisions of the state constitution on the eve of revolutionizing of world travel, right? There's been a lot of changes. People can come from one part of the world to another much more quickly and much more efficiently than when this provision was contemplated. And I think we have to be really careful about what the future may hold, because the tumults of the world will continue, and we cannot be expected to foot the bill at a moment's notice when these crises erupt. And so I thank you for your answers, and I thank you for making yourself so accessible to me and other colleagues who are not on this committee during this process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have Committee Member Krishnan, followed by Riley, and then Council Member Sanchez.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you, Speaker. It's good to see a fellow public interest lawyer nominated for this position. I remember 10 years ago sitting in your office and your HRA commissioner saying that we were going to sue HRA to protect the tenant's home. And you said, don't sue, we'll make sure she can stay in her home. And you did. So I hope you bring that perspective to the law department too, should you be confirmed. And I hope you also sue, because suing is an important part of this job too. But I have a few questions. One question is, and I think Speaker Menon raised this before too. I do think that, the structure of city government and the charter, housing all these responsibilities in Corporation Counsel, does present a real conflict at times between the Corporation Council's ability to represent one client, the City Council, and the other client, the mayor. And so while it may not present an actual conflict of interest, it does create, on-the-ground conflicts at times. And so I just wanted to hear a bit again about how you would navigate your role representing both sets of clients that can at times see matters differently.
I think it's a great question, and I just want to reemphasize that I think the lawyers in the particular unit that do this work are just extraordinary public servants and are really conscious of the tensions that are sort of behind some of these questions from the chair and from the speaker and from you about how do we balance all of these different inputs. I think the way we balance it is to understand our role ultimately is what's best for the city of New York and the people in the city of New York, understanding that the role of the council is an important role and the role of the executive is an important role. So I think our focus is to make sure that we're set up in such a way that we can give confidential advice to both sides of that legislative equation. I think, though, that what the speaker appropriately pressed me on was the importance of early consultation and early engagement. When you came to me and said, we're going to sue you over this particular situation, you didn't come to me on the way to the courthouse door. Yeah. You came to me at a time when I could do something and it was better for the client that you had, and I know that's why you came to me, frankly, because you said, and your colleague said, you know what, this is crazy to have to sue the city about this. And I listened to it and I said, this is crazy to be sued about this. So I think it's the same approach to legislation, that we have to give each other enough space so that we can play the role the law department can play, which is to try to bring everybody together for what's in the best interests of the city. You're all here because you ran to serve the best interests of the city. The executive is here because it's people, the mayor and the people that serve in it want to serve the best interests of the city. I think the law department has a key role at that intersection if given enough time to come to the best results for the people. Because I always looked at this when I was a commissioner, and I realize I'm not running for commissioner here, but when I was a commissioner, prior speakers, Speaker Mark Burrito, Speaker Johnson would call me, Steve Levin, who was the chair of general welfare, they would call me and say, we're thinking of doing X. And my first answer wasn't no. My first answer was, I understand what you want to do, but I don't think I can do it the way you want to do it. Can we do it this way instead? And sometimes the answer was no, but maybe we could. So the engagement is actually 99% of the game. And that's my approach. I said this to some of you who I've met with. Other people said I'm crazy to make this representation. When I was the head of legal aid, when I was the head of the Department of Social Services, I made sure you all had my cell phone number because there's nothing like communication to try to cut through disputes. Am I always going to be able to say, you're right, we'll do it? No. But I want to make sure that as the chief legal officer of the city, I'm available to you for those conversations so that ladies like your client get the best results of the city, which is the executive and the council working together.
And your recognition of the nuances of this position and that role is much appreciated too. And I think that's also why you're hearing that come up a lot from my colleagues and myself too, is it is an important part of this position. So I appreciate that. My second question is about, on the other side of the coin on immigration, we have strong sanctuary policies in this city. And we are at a time, as we all know, and you mentioned too, that is perilous for so many immigrants across our city and across the country. How have you thought about, in your role, should you be confirmed as Corporation Counsel, how you would ensure that all city agencies are complying with the sanctuary laws that we have?
I think it's similar to the role that I had when I was commissioner of one agency. What are the procedures that we had in place to make sure that it was clear to frontline staff what the law required? And I think the law department can play a key role in making sure that it's clear and unequivocal what our laws require, and that we've got everybody's back in complying with those laws. From afar, I read about certain things that happened in the prior administration in which I think the frontline workers didn't necessarily get the clearest of communications. So to me, it's about communication. It's about ensuring that the law department is there to support the agencies and to support the city overall to do what the law requires, which is to protect people.
And my final question, I think the staff at the law department is excellent. I also think that lawyers, by nature, can be very cautious, and I say that as a covering lawyer myself, too cautious. And I bring that up because at times we look to pass legislation in the council, but there can be concerns raised by the law department about should we pass this legislation, it would mean XYZ thing, or it may provoke litigation from a certain interest, corporate or otherwise. And those are things I don't believe that we should be afraid to pass bills because of legislation, which will inevitably come, and we make the best defenses we can, and we advance legislation we need to advance that's doing right by New Yorkers. And so at times when an agency institutionally can be more risk-averse, despite the matter in front of them and the importance of moving it forward, how would you, leading the law department, approach an issue like that, and thinking about both anticipating litigation but not being too risk-averse to want to avoid litigation at all costs either?
I think going back to actually the minority leader's question to me, I've not been afraid to take on litigation and to defend people's rights. I think that one of the core questions about how to have lawyers be the most helpful is to understand what the client's goal is and then be at the ground floor of constructing a defensible local law to achieve what the goals are. In my experience, taking this out of the context of the council and the executive, in my experience, the client counseling works best when at the beginning, before pen is even taken to paper, everyone understands what the goals are, and then the best writing occurs when everyone is trying to get to yes, rather than everyone is working off of what feels like it might be set in stone. So process actually really matters here to getting to good, enforceable, defensible laws.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Councilmember Krishna actually kind of centralized the question I wanted to ask you, so I'm going to try to reword it in a different way to see if you could give me experience. But you are going to be handling a lot of, tough litigations within this role. How do you handle situations where legal compliance conflicts with public perception and organizational values? And along with that, can you describe an experience where you managed legal issues that involved a lot of media scrutiny?
Can I start with the example first?
Yeah.
And then maybe we can look at how I navigated it. At the beginning of COVID, it was clear that I needed to evacuate the single adult congregate shelters, and that if we didn't move quickly in the middle of a lockdown and evacuate 10,000 people, that people were going to die. And I knew that there would be concerns about evacuating 10,000 people and putting them into vacant hotel rooms in communities. And at the end of the day, I couldn't live with myself if one person died because I didn't act. So I acted. And there was a lot of scrutiny. But at the end of my days, I will have no regrets about doing what I thought the right thing to do for very vulnerable people was.
Thank you. And the first question, the compliance?
I think the first question is, I hate to kind of give you the same answer to your neighbor colleague. I think it's about process. And how do we treat each other as, actors in the political space, elected officials who want to accomplish things for constituents, lawyers in the law department who want to make sure that what is being achieved is going to accomplish the goal and do it in a way that doesn't create liability for the city. But I'm not going to be afraid to wade into that challenge, because that's, I think, the law department's traditionally been here for and will continue to be here for, to give the support to you as elected officials to accomplish what you think is best for your
Be focused on for the first 100 days within this role.
So I've become head of several organizations, and my priority has always been to engage the people doing the work and hear what it is that they think about the work they're doing and the things that they might want to do that they haven't been able to do for various reasons. So to me, my highest priority is to engage the staff of the law department first, and to be able to understand the things that they are going through on a day-to-day basis that I can help move forward. An adjacent first priority is to engage the commissioners and general counsels of all the agencies to hear about what their issues are, what their concerns are, to begin to do what I talked to Speaker Menon about, also with Chair Ung, which is risk assessment, and to help them address concerns that they have about their mission and risks and concerns they have, because that's how we're going to get better results for New Yorkers.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Sanchez?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Congratulations, first and foremost, on your nomination. I have personally long admired your work. It's been incredible what you, as an individual actor, have been able to accomplish to keep more people in their homes, defending the right to shelter, and creating the City FEPS program, which is what my question, of course, is about. And thank you, Madam Speaker, for asking the initial questions on FEPS earlier. I just wanted to follow up because we all know the delays in implementation of the FEPS expansion that this council passed in 2023 is and continues to have real impacts on our families across the city. More families are evicted, more families are unable to access homes when every single day that passes that these bills are not being implemented. I'm the first to acknowledge that the bill package was sweeping, and that's because we as a council, our communities, advocates, we believe that transformation was necessary to prevent the evictions before they happen, to shorten shelter stays when they do, and to stabilize families. So my follow-up question is regarding the law department's request for a 30-day adjournment that was granted last week. First part is, what would you want the public to think about the request? And importantly, I think you answered some of this before, but just to ask it very succinctly, as Corp Counsel, would you be open to withdrawing that lawsuit? And the second part of my question is, if you have specific concerns with the legislation that you would want to be discussing over settlement negotiations, could you name some of those specifically, whether they're fiscal, administrative, legal, and distinguish those from the position of the previous administration, which had the position that we as a council cannot legislate in the arena of social services? I'll stop there.
First of all, nice to see you. Thank you for your kind words.
Likewise.
And a personal apology publicly that I haven't had time to speak individually with you yet, but we will, I hope you'll be able to make the time to speak to me. Look, this is an important program. I felt that way when we created it after a number of years of which there was no rental assistance in New York City, and the shelter census went up 38%. That wasn't good for people, it wasn't good for the city budget, it wasn't good for anything. And so it was, I think, an important thing to come up with a way to implement a program. Although we haven't spoken about it, I'm gonna say that I understand where you're coming from, which is that you want a program to be more flexible than the original one that I created. I can say this, and it really goes to the answers that I've been giving about process. that if I were the commissioner, or, you know, if it was during my time when I was in office, the communications, I realized that commissioners didn't have the ability to communicate with you in the last administration. I gather they had to go through a whole process. I see Councilmember Ressler smiling at me because that wasn't my practice when I was a commissioner, sometimes to the chagrin of the mayor's office, that I felt I had open communications at all times with council members. I would have called you up on the phone to say, so this is what I'm seeing from running the program. I see what you're seeing. How do we get to a place where we can have a program that accomplishes what you want to accomplish, that addresses issues that I got to address, and at the same time is fiscally responsible? That conversation didn't happen. That's what's going to happen during the period of trying to negotiate a settlement of this. And the issue about dropping the appeal or not, the process is to negotiate a settlement and have the conversations that we should have had as a city, not you and me, because I didn't have that role, but that we should have had as a city at the time, which is, what are your goals? What is the agency's goals? What's fiscally possible to do, and how do we get there? And that's what the settlement discussion is going to be.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I remember the 18th hour, millionth hour conversations where the bills were about to age, and we just hadn't heard anything from the administration, not the law department, not the commissioners, except no, which, yes, I agree is a part of why we ended up where we are. But I want to underscore, and especially in this public forum, thank you, Chair, and again, thanks to the Speaker for the time to be able to say this, is we really mean and meant what we said in the legislation, right? We have, it would be less expensive to keep people in their homes, to keep more of the most vulnerable people in their homes. So I just, I know that there's always a question about the financial health of the city, but I want to, I know that we share that North Star as humans, and to make sure that we share that as we talk through the settlements, and if you could keep us in the council, and of course the bill sponsors like Councilmember Caban and I that are still here, if you could keep us in the loop.
I know your focus is on the human beings, and I know, my focus has always been on the human beings, and that will be certainly a challenge before us of how to lift up the human beings involved and strike the balance with the fiscal health of the city. And that always was the balance with this program. And as I said, it's a conversation that should have happened 3 years ago. It's going to happen now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now we have Councilmember Hudson, followed by Ressler, and then Brewer.
Thank you, Chair. And just before I get to my questions, I would like to say that I believe you are an exceptional candidate for this role. As someone who's served those with the greatest needs for more than 3 decades at Legal Aid, you understand the issues on the ground that the city has been working to address, especially our right to shelter law. And in your work as DSS Commissioner, you increased access to key benefits like free legal counsel and housing court, SNAP, Medicaid, and rental assistance. You also mentioned the historic decision of Muriel Good-Trufant to not represent the previous mayor, and I know that you will follow in that same vein of simply doing what is right and best, and I'm proud to represent both of you in District 35. And so now for my questions. You've already been asked about your position on city FEPS and the ongoing legislation, but this body has also sued the former mayoral administration regarding its policy on ICE at Rikers for violating city law that the council passed. Recognizing that each case is unique, can you share a general approach to upholding the laws passed by this co-equal branch of government and how you direct the department to address any pending lawsuits that precede both you and Mayor Mamdani?
Thank you for your kind words. I appreciate it, and I appreciate that you're my member of my council member. Just to maybe give you a sense of where I come from on this issue, there are various pieces of legislation that I wrote with council members over the years when I was at the Legal Aid Society that are now enshrined in the administrative code of the city and that I have brought lawsuits to enforce over the years. So the important role that the council plays in passing legislation to benefit the residents of the city of New York is something that I have lived with throughout my professional life. But I can't emphasize enough that the challenges of the last 4 years, I know that they are an overhang for the members that live through it, but I want to make sure that we have a fresh start in engaging together in the process that the speaker and I talked about a little bit, engaging in a process in which there's enough time to really look at what it is you want to accomplish in a piece of legislation and what it is that legally can be accomplished. And I've always believed sometimes there's a different way to do the same thing, and one way is possible and one way is not possible. And so that's going to be my approach.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Are there any instances in which you diverge from your predecessors regarding their positions on litigation?
Yeah, as I said, I have great respect for your constituent, my former adversary and my current colleague, Miro Gutterfont. When I said I'm going to take a review of all the cases, that's what I did, as I said, when I became head of legal aid, when I became the commissioner of the Department of Social Services. That's not a reflection on her, it's not a reflection on anybody, but I'm a different person, and I want to see what our positions are in various cases and whether or not there's the ability to change, and if not, is there an underlying policy that should be changed, and then I want to talk to the commissioners and the general counsels involved.
Fair, thank you. And lastly, how do you view the law department's role in advancing the mayor's policy agenda, specifically around issues of affordability and community safety?
I think the law department is a key part of advancing the agenda of any mayor, particularly this mayor, who has such a transformative agenda to address this issue of affordability that I've been fighting to address for my entire professional life. So I think lawyers have a role in addressing the affordability crisis that has reached epic proportions in the city. That's why the mayor's transformational agenda is so important to me. But I think the law department is ready to be on the front lines of doing the things that are needed. Executive orders, legislation, defending in lawsuits, helping with policy development. Lawyers are necessary for a lot of parts of modern life, particularly for the kind of transformative agenda to really lift up New Yorkers that the mayor has.
Thank you. If my district's track record for confirming corporation counsel means anything, then I look forward to working with you more closely. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Ressler?
Thank you so much, Chair Ung. And while you may reside in Councilmember Hudson's district, you're walking distance from the 33rd. I have to say I am genuinely thrilled by this appointment. I have been in the trenches with you, and you are as brilliant and as ethical and as creative as any public servant I know. As you've said today, you always center the most vulnerable in the work that you do, and I know you will bring that commitment to the law department. I am just excited to be working with you again in this new capacity, and I am hopeful that my colleagues will similarly endorse your candidacy after such a thoughtful hearing today. I did want to ask a couple questions about areas that I don't think we've touched on as much as I would hope. First is just law department staffing. So when we look back to the pre-pandemic levels, we are down, I believe, 216 attorneys at the law department. That's a 23% decrease. 1 out of 4 law department attorneys gone, up in smoke. And we all know that the work of city agencies grinds to a halt when we can't get the attention of the law department. The law department doesn't have capacity to process critical contracts, information, analysis, guidance that our agencies and the city council depends on. Do you have a game plan? I know we've got some budgetary challenges, but do you have a game plan for the review that you're planning to conduct, recommendations that you're going to forge for the budget director and the first deputy mayor and the mayor for how we can staff up the law department?
Yes, but let me just say first, thank you for your very kind words. It is true that I live adjacent to the 33rd, and we have great places to eat in the 35th, but you have some okay places too in the 33rd. So
I'm going to ignore this. I'm going to ignore it and focus on the law department staffing.
Look, You know, the mayor, I think, has been very clear publicly about the damage of hollowing out the law department. And I'm certainly going to work with the administration about the best path forward to address that problem. I do have experience when I was the head of the Legal Aid Society of hiring large numbers of lawyers in a short period of time when we implemented the criminal defense case caps. So I understand how important it is to recruit and to recruit at local law schools. So I will be ready to work with the recruitment team at the law department to be able to move forward with the staffing that we're able to do. But the review that I talked about can be parallel to addressing staffing. The first question is like, what are we doing and what do we need? But you certainly highlighted the challenges we've got with staffing, which the mayor's highlighted. I appreciate you've also highlighted the challenges with the finances. But as I said before, I've managed at Legal Aid where we could both, two things could be true at once, which is we need more people and we have challenging finances.
I know you'll have a champion in our esteemed new GovOps chair, Councilmember Brewer. I think you've responded enough on the Tim Pearson situation, but appreciate that you'll be reviewing representation decisions. I wanted to ask about juvenile justice issues. As I know you know, the number of kids in jail doubled. The number of minors incarcerated in New York City doubled during the tenure of Eric Adams. So much so that we're spending tens of millions of dollars to expand our kid jails. Disgraceful as it is, the law department has a limited but important role in this area, as it serves as the prosecutors in many cases that can potentially result in incarceration for our young people. The percent of cases referred to law that are filed for prosecution increased substantially under Eric Adams from 30 to 38%. And I hope, I'll ask, will you closely review the law department's policies and determine if we can more successfully refer young people to ATI, ATD, alternatives to incarceration, alternative to detention programs, and reduce incarceration as much as possible among our kids?
I mean, that's a perspective I come from. Young people are the future of the city. Giving them a helping hand is more likely to lead to success in their life and therefore a success in the city's life. It's among a priority area for me to look at. I haven't yet been able to engage with the lawyers doing that work. I want to hear what their concerns are, what their challenges are, and I'm going to bring to that my experience of, running an organization that had a juvenile rights practice that represented young people with the aim of getting them on a pathway for success in life, and that's certainly going to be my orientation to lift up young people whenever we can.
Great. Lastly, you will be the fourth corporation counsel who is confirmed via advice and consent. And from my perspective, the law department has oriented to be more responsive to the city council in general since the advice and consent process was created for your position, which I think is a positive thing. It's still evolving, and I think, frankly, we still have some ways to go. I recognize there can be conflicts. I recognize the process of setting up internal firewalls can be a little bit confusing to me, at least. Maybe not to Spencer, although I think he's retiring. Is that right?
Spencer is retiring.
What an enormous loss for the city of New York. Gosh.
Big shout out to Spencer Fisher.
Seriously.
Sorely missed.
Truly. So thank you for your many years of excellent service, Spencer. But what I'm really getting at is when council members need legal advice on environmental projects in our district, on contract issues, when we have priority projects that we're really trying to push forward and it's stuck at the law department for months on end because of the reduction in staffing that we saw by Eric Adams, can we get a meaningful commitment that there's going to be more responsiveness to the council, that there's going to be a sense of partnership, that when there are priorities for council members and for the body as a whole that we need for attention and support from the law department, that we will get that more?
Yes, but I want to modify your question slightly. You will have responsiveness. Whether you didn't have it before or not, I understand that's been your experience, but I want to continue to lift up the lawyers at the law department in my answer to you, which is say, yes, we will value responsiveness, and as I committed before, you already do. You'll call me if we're not being responsive,
Right.
and we will respond.
I will, and my comments on Spencer or Cheryl or Eric or many people who are, many great people at the law department. It's not a critique or a criticism. I think that the orientation of the agency is still that it is a mayoral agency that is primarily responsive to the mayor, and what we're trying to shift is that the law department is there for the city as a whole, for all elected officials, and that when we have priorities as a body, as members, we'd like them to be responded to, and I appreciate you saying there will be responsiveness. It has been uneven in my 4 years in the council.
I'm going to just reiterate what I said at the top in my testimony. I wanted to be the lawyer for the city of New York, and I want to make sure that I infuse that in everything that I do, to be the lawyer for the city of New York. But I hear what you're saying.
Have every confidence you are going to do an absolutely excellent job. Thank you for your time today, and thank you, Chair Ung, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Councilwoman Brewer?
Thank you very much. I can't remember not knowing you. And I want you to know.
That's a compliment, right?
Yes, it's a compliment. And I also want you to know that the 134 veterans are still at 330 West 95th Street, thanks to you. And I want you to know that the lady and the man who made the cookies are still in their apartment because you gave them a very large one-shot. Thank you very much.
Don't tell the budget director.
I will not. That was a while ago, so he wouldn't know.
I think he's the first deputy mayor now.
Yes. A couple of things. Just picking up on the speaker about 9/11 Health Watch and the 9/11 issue. So it's my bill that passed that said that the charter gave us the opportunity to tell the Department of Investigation to find the files. So that's happening. We went to the Department of Environmental Protection and sat there and opened up 26 boxes and saw what was there. There are a total of 68, and we're going to get them. But there's two questions for you. One is, I guess what you said was that you will make everything available regarding whatever the Corporation Counsel has, but I also want you to know that we still want the report that is mandated by my law from the Department of Investigation. They have a couple of years to look to see what totally is available. So I want to make sure that you will be supportive of that, and that exactly what will you do at the law department in terms of the material.
I am supportive of your law. Just to reiterate what I said to the speaker, that I will commit to you that we are going to review what we have, what others have, and release or make available what can be made available. I didn't want to create the misimpression that everything could be released, because some of the things have people's personal identifying information and medical records and employment records, and that I do not believe, I'll certainly redouble my review of it, but I do not believe that sort of thing can be released.
Right.
But I think I understand, and we'll certainly talk soon about what kind of information you're looking for, but that's what our review will be, to see what we have, what others have, and what can be made accessible, as the speaker pointed out to me in the 25th anniversary year of the horrible tragedy that,
Right, and then
as
of
I
course
said, I experienced personally.
Thank you. And I know you also support the fact that DOI will continue their research.
Absolutely.
Okay. Second, of course, is under Victor Kovner. That was a few years ago, but in my 30. Shut up. Victor Kovner was Corporation Counsel.
You and I were a lot younger.
Yeah, we were both
then.
alive.
We were both younger.
Half of these people were not alive, but we were alive. So he spent a lot of time when I was then the director of federal affairs for Mayor Dinkins, figuring out how, and I think you alluded to this earlier, you could prevent some of the lawsuits, prevent some of the, and you talked about it a little bit earlier, but I just wanted to hear a little bit more about, because that will obviously save money, save time, save everything. And he spent a great deal of time. I don't know that he felt he was completely successful, but he certainly tried.
So can I give you an example of my experience with this? So when I became the head of the Legal Aid Society, one of the things I wanted to understand from the criminal defense lawyers were the things that went into their representation of clients that made it impossible to manage the numbers of cases that they had, so that we could create a caseload standard that Chief Judge Lippman worked with me to promulgate, which dramatically reduced the numbers of cases that our lawyers had at the time. I know a lot's happened since that time, and there are issues with respect to that standard. But my approach to it, which would be similar here, is to understand what are the elements to go into the most common cases that we get, whether they're civil rights cases or personal injury cases. What are the most common elements, and what can we do upstream to address those matters from becoming lawsuits? That's different than saying, oh, let's just look at the cases and we'll litigate this one and settle that one. We should do that too. But that's why I referenced a unit that was created, that Muriel, under her watch and her leadership, a risk assessment unit. It plays right to the kinds of things I've done. I did it when I went to DSS too. Why is it that people are getting their cases closed all the time? And we cut the number of fair hearing requests in half by taking that kind of analysis of what's driving a certain kind of agency conduct and how can we stop it or mitigate it. And that will be my approach.
I think it's a huge effort and very worthwhile when successful. FOIL. At this point, we did pass a law recently on FOIL. There have been many laws in the past. I know that the Department of Records, to their credit, now has a website, so there's more information available. But I wanted to know, because the law department probably gets FOILed more than others, as does NYPD. So I wanted to know what your position is on FOIL, how you think it could be improved. Obviously, the more information is available on open data, the less FOILs may take place. I just want to get a little sense of how you think it could be improved.
I filed a lot of FOILs in my life.
I know you have.
And I answered a lot of FOILs when I was the Department of Social Services Commissioner. Honestly, this is an area in which I need to do more review to have a responsible answer for you. I know it's been an issue that's been raised by oversight hearings at the council, but I need to look at it more closely to give you a responsible answer.
All right. Thank you very much.
We have Council Member Wong, followed by Showman, and then Caban.
Commissioner Banks.
Ex-Commissioner Banks.
Okay, ex-Commissioner Banks, thanks. A New York Post analyst found that during your tenure at Department of Homeless Services, there was $4.6 billion in contracts. That's nearly 30% of all the shelter spending went to 8 scandal tar operators. You told reporters that it wasn't as simple as getting rid of everyone who does anything wrong. My question for you is, why did you tolerate this level of corruption? And what does this say about you, your ability to ensure legal compliance as Corporation Counsel?
With respect to the New York Post, I don't think they actually got it right. What actually happened when I became the Social Services Commissioner is that I stopped doing business with a number of corrupt providers that I had inherited. Then during my tenure, the frontline staff discovered that some other providers had been engaging in misconduct. We flagged it for DOI, and during the DOI investigation, obviously, we had to continue those relationships until their investigation was continued. But we set aside money in each of those contracts so that we would ensure that the misconduct did not result in the loss of taxpayer money. I then brought the first ever lawsuit against one of the providers to have a receiver appointed and to wind them down. So I think, contrary to what the New York Post said about me, that the record, public record, is one of canceling contracts, rigorously overseeing contracts, finding misconduct, taking action, preserving taxpayer dollars.
Regarding Mr. David Leviton, his company, he was still doing business to today. He's still a vendor of DHS, and he's cited as New York City's worst landlord. So you kept him.
I think what was interesting about Mr. Levitan and some of the reporting on him is that all of the reporting on him historically was on how many violations there were in the shelter buildings that he provided to the city. However, we said we wouldn't continue to do business with any site that he was the underlying landlord for unless he addressed the violations. And so what was never reported was how was it that we turned somebody that had violation-filled buildings into someone that had few, if any, violations? And we did this by threatening to eliminate the cities doing business with him, and he complied. And that resulted in people having habitable shelters. And we had a shelter repair squad that was rigorously inspecting. I understand we live in a world in which accusations can be made, but I think it's really important to focus on the actual facts.
My follow-up question is, most of your career you've been suing the city, and now you want to sit on the other side defending city, and what changed your mind?
That's a great question. I appreciate you asking it. And it reminds me of some of the first times I think we met years ago, in which then I was the city. When I was a city, I was represented by the law department. People I was able to be represented by the law department when people brought various lawsuits. But I think it goes back to the questions that some of your colleagues from Queens asked me before, which is, I went into government to be the Social Services Commissioner because I thought that it was a way to make change and help New Yorkers. And I think we did make change and help lots of New Yorkers. And I want to take on this role because I think at this moment the law department can continue to play an even greater role in helping New Yorkers. So to me, the power of government to improve lives is why I want to have this role, and it's the reason why I went into public service 45 years ago and went to the Legal Aid Society. But I do have a unique perspective on the law department, having litigated against them for 33 years.
Councilmember Shulman.
Hi, Mr. Banks.
Good to see you, Councilmember.
Good to see you. So the mayor, during his campaign, pledged to hire about 200 lawyers in the law department. So do you agree with that position? And if so, what would be the role of those attorneys? Is there a specific agenda? Because it's a lot of people.
So I think going back to Councilmember Ressler's question, the head count of the law department has been significantly decreased, along with other agencies, in terms of significant decrease. I am ready to work with the administration to begin the process of addressing that kind of staffing reduction, but also within the context of the budget challenges that we've got. In terms of what roles they would play, part of the roles that more lawyers are needed to play is to be able to fill the vacancies that have been had. To go back to the question that various council members have asked me about dealing with the lawsuits that keep getting brought against the city, having an enhanced risk assessment unit is part of the key to that. Addressing the need to stand up for New Yorkers at this historical moment is part of the need for that. You're right, it's a large number, but it's a number that has to be viewed against the backdrop of how many positions have been lost.
So those 200 wouldn't be hired like right away. You're talking about over time. You're going to make an assessment of the staffing first.
We've got to make an assessment about where the needs are. I don't want to prejudge it.
Right.
And also consistent with working with the administration in terms of the overall fiscal challenges that we have. But I'm also open for suggestions about areas in which we think we should be working in that we haven't historically been working in, or areas in which you think we could beef up. I want to work with you. I'm open to suggestions that you may have.
Great. And I know other members have asked this in various forms, but you're willing to sit down with us individually and as a group to talk about, because the previous councils have not, so.
I can't speak to their context.
Understood.
But I can say for my way of dealing with the role that I'm asking you to confirm me for, I want to be accessible to you.
Okay.
And no problem is too small.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And now we are powering through to the end. We're going to have Councilmember Caban, Santoso, and Vernikoff.
Like, whoa.
We do know each other.
We do. Dangerous mic. I'm going to put the mic back here.
Good to see you. You can call me Steve.
I'm like, get that thing away from me. The need, we need more lawyers. And I just want to say that I was a case cap baby. So I was a law graduate that came in with the new case cap laws, and I'd like to think that you recruited a pretty darn good class. So
You're absolutely right.
I want to hit you with two pretty specific questions and then move to some broader things. I want to follow up on something that Councilmember Sanchez brought up. I really appreciated your answer that you gave to her questions, but there was one that I don't believe we got the direct answer to, and so I'm going to pose it. Do you object to the council legislating in the area of rental assistance? Or do you think that that's an appropriate place for us to be doing our work?
Can I broaden your question slightly? Social services.
Maybe. Oh, yes, sure. Yes, actually, in that context, yes, broaden it, please.
I thought you would agree with broadening.
Yeah.
Historically, there has been legislation in the area of social services.
Yes, there has, yeah.
And some of that legislation I've drafted myself over time, the Valone Law, a number of other laws. Other areas in the area of social services do require state approval with respect to public assistance eligibility and so forth. So this is a process that I was referring to in answering your colleague's question about navigating that terrain between the areas that have historically been local, shelter conditions, for example, whether you could leave children to sleep overnight in an intake office, for example, versus those that go to the core of public assistance eligibility, which have been more complex to navigate. But while it may not be a satisfying answer, I think this issue is going to get resolved in the settlement discussions, because I understand that this is not a one legislative area problem to address. It's an area that we have to wrestle to the ground in the settlement.
And I'm going to broaden your broadening, because essentially what we're talking about here is preemption, right?
Understood.
And I will say that, like, in New York City, located within New York State, in terms of our preemption challenges, they pale in comparison to what some of our municipal colleagues across the country have to deal with in their cities. And they're going to bat. They are going hard litigating preemption issues, because their local government understands that in a lot of ways it's life or death in some of the political context and the terrain that we're facing on the federal level. And so I hope that you guys come with the same vigor in terms of challenging preemption where it really feels appropriate and necessary.
Understood. Look, the home rule area is one that is case by case, but also the law department, we all have to be very cognizant of what our municipal prerogatives can and should be. But, a lot of these are obviously background issues with coming to a settlement and that litigation.
Thank you. I know my colleagues have also asked a lot about sanctuary protections. Again, I want to ask a more discrete question. Will you commit to establishing a protocol for all city agencies that the law department must review any request for information from ICE, DHS, or any request to transfer somebody in custody to ICE or DHS?
I think every agency, I have to go back to my time as commissioner. I had such a protocol, and I reviewed them. Whether or not that is sufficient, I don't know the answer to yet, but I will commit to you to look into whether my experience of being a commissioner is generalizable across the city, and whether there should be a bigger role, as you articulate, for the law department.
And maybe an even bigger role, especially considering we have just recently updated the definition of federal enforcement to cover some of these other agencies that are engaging in this work.
Warrantless searches, for example. you
Right.
mean. Yes. That may well inform what we need, as you highlight.
Right, thank you. I want to talk a little bit about, you probably won't be surprised, Department of Corrections. Access to medical care. I mean, it's been what feels like an eternity, but 5 very long years that DOC has fought litigation in the Agnew versus New York City DOC case, seeking to remedy the department's failure to comply with city law and provide incarcerated people with access to medical care. And so, what, as Corporation Counsel, what will you do to ensure that the DOC takes the necessary measures to ensure incarcerated people have access to medical care?
I haven't looked at that particular litigation, but maybe giving you an example of what I have been.
And if I could add just something briefly to it, since you haven't looked at it, I mean, just for context, the department was held in contempt in 2022 because of its repeated failures in providing access to medical care. And that was, thousands of missed medical appointments, unnecessary pain, worsening treatable conditions, and then suffering. A lot of us obviously walked the halls of Rikers and saw those things up front, so.
No, I hear your question. I haven't looked at that particular litigation yet. I've been very focused on issues with respect to the remediation manager in Nunez, solitary confinement, and the executive order that had been issued for the entire 4 years of the prior administration suspending Board of Correction standards. I understand how important medical care is, and I will commit to you to look at that one as well.
And I would encourage you, I mean, can we get also a commitment to kind of looking into not just solitary confinement, but the practice of deadlocking? What the waiting areas outside of the clinics looks like.
I think with the new commissioner there,
I'm very pleased about. I'm sure that's also not a surprise.
I think with the new commissioner who, like me, has devoted his life to trying to address the needs of people caught up in the Rikers experience, and the remediation manager, that we have a lot of opportunity to make some substantial change to benefit people, to benefit the officers that are there, and to benefit the human beings that are sent there.
And I mean, in that vein, can we talk a little bit about trans and gender nonconforming incarcerated individuals? Will you ensure that the department will end its practice of relying on the securing order to determine where trans people are sent for intake?
I mean, I think, as you know, I've represented a lot of trans clients over my time, and I am painfully familiar with the experience that trans people have in many different aspects of daily life in the city, let alone at Rikers. I'm going to have to take a close look to address that case too. And in all honesty, I haven't looked at it yet. And I know it's a really important pressing issue. It's a pressing issue to you, but to the human beings involved too.
Yeah, and I think, what's going to be necessary here is going to be the institution of new policies that ensure that trans women are sent to Rosie's for intake, and that we're training staff to be able to make sure that that happens, that they're actually complying with that. And in addition to the problems with the intake, DOC is also routinely housing trans women in men's jails or involuntarily moving them out of Rosie's into the men's jail, despite the fact that New York state law recognizes trans people should be treated consistently with their gender identity. So I'm assuming that the answer is similar, but I want to ask it and get it on the record. What are you going to do to ensure that the DOC stops placing trans women in housing that places them at risk of rape and assault?
It's heartbreaking to hear you describing what's happening to people. I'm confident that with the new commissioner, with my perspective, that we can address some of these things. I know it's frustrating that I can't give you a concrete, yes, we'll address that. I just haven't had a chance to look at it, and I think we know each other well enough that I'm not going to commit to things that I haven't looked at yet to be able to tell you what we can do about them.
Fair enough. I'm just giving you things to follow up on.
That's why these oversight hearings and confirmation hearings are great, because it gives me a list to follow up on.
A question that and then I'll make space for my colleague, a question that Councilmember Nurse was hoping I would ask on her behalf because she had to leave, also having to do with Rikers, but specifically high school education at Rikers. The DOC is currently violating several portions of a 2016 judgment that requires all 18 to 21-year-olds without a high school diploma or GED be provided at least 3 hours of school a day. And, what will you do to ensure the Department of Correction will comply with its obligations under the Hanbury consent? And can you say something other than, we've got a really great new commissioner of DOC and he's going to work on it?
I think what I can also add to that is the following value. I think my track record is in bringing contempt proceedings against the city for violating court orders and succeeding. I don't want to have to defend contempt proceedings.
Well, historically, our DOC and NYPD have made that pretty difficult.
I think the people in DOC, I think the people who are at Rikers want there to be a new day, and I think there is going to be a new day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Santoso.
Thank you, Chair Ong. Good afternoon, Mr. Banks. Thank you for being with us. And I want to acknowledge your long and impactful career as a public service and public interest attorney. I myself had the privilege of being a law department attorney. I was in the tort division. And even for those who know about the law department and what it does, often they don't have any idea what the tort division does. So I'm actually going to focus all of my questions on the tort division this afternoon.
That's great. Did you appreciate that I talked about judgment?
That's what I remember from
What was that?
Did you appreciate that I talked about judgment and claims?
I sure did, and we're going to talk more about it because, as a lot of people don't know, that the judgments and claims that result from the tort division, I believe, are responsible for approximately 1% of the city's total budget, which doesn't sound like a lot, but actually is a lot of taxpayer dollars when it comes down to it. The tort division, as you know, handles thousands and thousands of cases brought against the city. And as a first-year attorney, I myself had a caseload of usually about over 100 cases at any given time, and that was the case for pretty much all 3 years that I was there. I don't want to belabor the staffing issue, which we've talked about a lot in this hearing, but you did sort of open the door to say, where should some of those attorneys that you've committed to hiring go? And I would like to personally make the plug that I believe a lot of them should go to the tort division. Because
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, and maybe you could share with me what you see as some of the issues that arise when the tort division itself is understaffed. Because what I can share is that when the line attorneys have caseloads that are over 100 cases, we're not litigating to the best of our ability. We're not being as aggressive as we can be. And so my concern is that it can result in inflated settlement values, which, settlement, of course, is an efficient way to dispose of cases, but we want to make sure we're not overpaying on our settlements. Would you agree?
I completely agree with you. I think you're getting at the following, which is the key need, the crucial need for early evaluation and assessment of cases, because that determines whether or not there should be an early settlement. And someone once told me that the best settlement is an early settlement. If you're going to settle the case later for that which you could have settled for at the beginning, and then you've got all the other expenses that are racked up because of a late settlement, that's a place where costs can be controlled.
Right.
And that also is a place where, frankly, the quality of the work life of the lawyers can be improved for the reasons that you described. And so being able to assess cases early is so essential, and that's why staffing is so important too.
Excellent. Our previous mayor thought a part of the solution to the understaffing problem was to essentially bring on pro bono attorneys from white shoe law firms. And with all due respect to attorneys from white shoe law firms, they were often younger, attorneys with less litigation experience than even the skilled line attorneys that were in the tort division. And it would often be the case that sometimes the tort division attorneys would then be helping to train the pro bono attorneys who were supposed to be taking on some of the work from the tort division attorneys themselves. So would you agree that replacing, the hiring lines of skilled and practiced line attorneys with pro bono volunteers from white shoe law firms is not a sustainable solution to the tort division's understaffing problem?
Yes, and also it didn't work.
Right.
Because there weren't hundreds of volunteers. There were very limited numbers of volunteers. Before I left Paul Weiss, when I ran the pro bono practice, we were asked to provide some volunteers, and we provided a volunteer who did not go to the law department, went to, other agencies. There were several of them over a period of time, but they went to different agencies. But I knew, from what I knew about running a law firm, that pro bono help is important and could play a key role. But if you attempt to have episodic volunteers handle what is a full-time caseload, you won't have a solution. Long-term placements are something different, but the volume was never going to be enough to replace the people who lost in the tort division, for example. That I know from managing a law firm, from running legal aid, and also being at a white shoe law firm briefly.
Thank you. We were talking about the value of early settlement and assessment. Sometimes the attorney's abilities within the tort division to settle cases quickly or to settle cases at all can be hampered by a similar understaffing problem at the controller's office, and specifically in the Bureau of Law and Adjustment, which gives this city attorneys the authority to settle cases, often in court-ordered settlement conferences, where the city has been ordered to show up, and does show up, but still doesn't have the authority from the controller's office because they're dealing with the same issues that the tort division attorneys are. Understanding that you don't have, as the corporation counsel, the single-handed ability to increase controller staffing, what are some ways that you think that we can alleviate the delay on the law department's ability to settle cases with controller authority?
What I do have, though, is a long-standing working relationship with the controller.
Right.
For the record, we did work together with now Borough President Gibson to craft what became the right to counsel law. Yep. That was not an easy negotiation among the three of us and among the council staff and my agency staff, but we all had the same goal in mind, which is how to make things better for the people of the city of New York. I know that the controller is somebody that is very practical and will be a good partner in addressing this problem.
Okay, and then the other question I wanted to talk about is fraud and fraudulent cases that are brought against the city. So it has been discovered that there are sometimes patterns of certain plaintiffs' attorneys partnering, for instance, with certain doctors and medical providers who prescribe plaintiffs' procedures and surgeries that are nowhere near medically necessary in order to increase the value of their case. There are also instances where the plaintiff's bar has created tools to exploit legal loopholes to extract significant taxpayer dollars from the city on patently undeserving cases, but which the law department does not currently have the resources or the will to fully combat. Would you be willing to work with the tort division leadership, attorney general's office, and the city council if necessary to combat patterns of fraud and exploitation of legal loopholes?
Absolutely. To my experience of being the DSS commissioner is that there were bad actors in the Medicaid space taking advantage of our clients, giving them free sneakers for unneeded medical tests. We had a whole unit, the program integrity unit, that helped develop cases that were then brought by district attorneys. So this is an area that I'm particularly interested in.
Excellent. And then I have just two more questions. One is that over time we have seen kind of the phasing out at the law department of back-to-back trial attorneys, which was a sort of role that where attorneys were handling, all the pre-litigation work was done and all the prep litigation work was done, and then the attorneys would go and try cases back-to-back in court. And understanding that often trial is not the best use of really anybody's resources, and you spoke about that earlier. If we can settle cases and if we can dispose of something early, then we should do it. What do you see as the law department's value in being able to try cases and being willing to try cases.
I think that Councilmember Caban and I would understand this is continuity of representation, and it's certainly an area that I'm going to want to engage with the law department team to see what can be done about that. I'm assuming it's a staffing challenge, but I also know that continuity of representation is important too.
And you know as a litigator too that the willingness to take a case to court, tends to keep the settlement values down as well.
I absolutely do.
And then finally, I just want to sort of underscore your appreciation for the risk assessment unit. It is an incredibly effective department in order to limit the city's liability in cases where we've identified, that ongoing issues that give rise to that liability. I think it depends a bit on the two-way communication between the administration and the risk department and how often that communication happens. And so it sounds like you understand and appreciate the value of that unit, and just, again, taking your opportunity to sort of say if some of those attorneys can go to risk and some of the resources can be addressed to risk, I think that would be an appropriate use of resources. So.
Great. Thank you for your observations based upon actual experience.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for your time. That's all I have.
Councilmember Vernikov, and just after Councilmember Vernikov, there's 2 follow-up questions by Councilmember Wong and then Councilmember Caban. Yeah, it's.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Chairwoman. Hi, Mr. Banks. Good afternoon. Good to see you. Thank you for being here to answer our questions. I know we may not agree on a lot of issues, but I do appreciate you reaching across the aisle to meet with us, and I look forward to sitting down with you. My first question is, and please correct me if I'm mischaracterizing, you have argued that everyone in need has a right to shelter based on, I guess, your understanding of the Callahan degree. Is that correct?
Not exactly. May I explain my answer?
Sure.
All of the litigation that I've done based upon the right to shelter that Minority Leader Carr asked me about has been trying to make sure that people didn't end up on the streets. And so that's always been the value of the litigation. It wasn't to vindicate a principle. It was to make sure that people in need didn't end up on the streets. In his questioning of me, he asked me about the applicability of the right to shelter to asylum seekers. If I may, can I explain my view of that, or is it a specific
Sure, and
question?
just to be transparent, that's exactly where I'm going with that.
I thought so, so I thought I would try to be helpful. Because I understand, having spoken to the minority leader and from his questioning, and I'm sure when I meet with the Republican caucus, we'll have more discussions about this. But I thought that the settlement that we reached, the city and the plaintiffs, and I was one of the lawyers of the plaintiffs, struck the right balance in terms of setting up procedures for determining eligibility for shelter for asylum seekers and establishing a framework to help people who had come to the city, who ended up in shelter, to relocate back to the community. So the litigation was hard fought with the law department, but I think we came to an appropriate balance of the right to shelter and the urgency of the situation the city was confronted in beginning in 2022.
I guess my question is, where specifically do you derive the right of undocumented migrants to have shelter rather than it's just meant for homeless New Yorkers, which is what I've argued?
There's a case that we litigated that went to the First Department of the New York State court system that said that there's a likelihood of success that there's a right to shelter under the New York State Constitution. And that I know that the perception is that there was only the right to shelter from a settlement. That was in the single adults case, but the families case was actually litigated to a decision in which there was a finding under the New York State Constitution that shelter was required. In the litigation that occurred a couple of years ago, the result in that settlement. I think everybody was cognizant of what the legal standard was for providing shelter, but what the settlement provided for was a way to determine eligibility for shelter for asylum seekers and a way to engage in asylum seekers so that they would move out of shelter.
Right, but it did not specifically state that undocumented migrants have a right to shelter. Can we agree to that?
I don't think that's what the settlement made it clear that people that came to the city, it was a settlement dated March 2024, I'd be happy to provide it to you. It created a process for asylum seekers to come, be evaluated for eligibility for shelter, and then be evaluated for eligibility for continuing shelter. So again, this is the outcome of litigation where both sides evaluated what was going to be the outcome potentially if it went to a full trial, and I think it was at the end of the day, as I've said a number of times, reaching settlements is always a better outcome for the city and for the individuals involved.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on. In one of his first major official acts as mayor, Mayor Mamdani reversed the policy of taking down tent encampments. As was mentioned earlier by the speaker, over 16 New Yorkers died during this storm, majority of their deaths related to hypothermia. Will you advise the mayor to keep this policy of not taking down encampments?
So let me speak from my personal experience first, and then talk about advice to the mayor. So in my experience over many, many years of trying to bring people in from the streets as their lawyer and then as the commissioner responsible for the program, simply moving people along has never been a way to effectively bring people in from the outside. It requires constant individualized evaluation and contact from outreach workers, and that's how I've always succeeded in bringing people inside. Simply moving them along has not been a successful approach. In terms of what I would advise the mayor, I know this came up earlier in the hearing, and I apologize that I'm going to have to just repeat myself. Under the rules of professional conduct, and I take them very seriously, if you asked me for legal advice, I would never testify about two things. One, that you asked me for advice, or two, what I actually told you. Under the rules of professional conduct, it's confidential whether you're asked for advice and what your actual advice is. So I know it might be frustrating, and I apologize, but I can't answer the actual question you're asking me for that reason.
Okay. Well, okay, can you answer this then? If the current policy stands, may the city be then exposed to potential litigation based on Callahan? If, let's say, a homeless individual dies in one of these encampments and their family chooses to sue, arguing they should have been in a shelter?
I honestly, from a legal point of view, I don't think that the encampment or existence or non-existence is the issue. I think the issue is the personal conduct that's required to bring people in from the streets. Under the state standard, in certain circumstances, people can be brought in from the streets involuntarily, and the current administration has been doing that, applying exactly the same standard as the prior administration did to make involuntary removals. It's one of the reasons why, from a human perspective, and look, my heart breaks to hear about anyone who's lost their life in the streets. But that's one of the reasons why it's so important that the mayor has directed additional resources for nurses and additional shelter resources to try to bring people in. And that's the only way people come in, constant individualized outreach, and that's what the city's been doing.
But in your legal opinion, do you think this policy, if it was to stay, would expose the city to liability?
As I said, I don't mean to frustrate you. I don't think that's actually a legal issue. I think the issue is how best can we bring people in from the streets. And I think my experience has always been there's no substitute for constant personal contact, and to offer people options. And that's why I said to the speaker earlier in this hearing, it was so important that she's embracing opening a safe haven shelter in her district where there are a number of people on the street, and I think that'll help bring people inside.
Thank you. Does the City of New York have legal authority under state or federal law to impose a boycott of Israel or Israel-affiliated entities through the city contracting or procurement system?
The city has, in the past, used its powers to make different kinds of policy decisions about how to do business, how to run our offices. This is a question I'm certainly going to look at if it is brought to my attention, and I'll give a legal opinion if it's brought to my attention.
As you may know, there are many economic benefits that an alliance with Israel has brought to the city. For example, in fiscal year 2022 through 23, Cornell Tech, including its operations, students, alumni, and affiliated startups, produced approximately $768 million in total economic impact in New York City. That economic activity supported roughly 2,800 jobs across the city. Would you advise the mayor to reverse course on this issue in the spirit of risk mitigation?
Let me just say, from a standpoint of Israel, I have family that lives in Israel. I've been to Israel. But under the rules of professional conduct, I can't tell you about whether I'm asked about these questions, and I can't tell you what my advice is.
It's just very concerning that if the mayor's reason was not economic, there's no really good reason for reversing the previous executive order, and it kind of reeks of anti-Semitism because there was no order directing a boycott, divestment, and sanction for any other country. Have you issued...
Just on that question, the council member,
Sure.
though, I actually agree with Congressman Nadler about the IHAR standard. You're referring to the International Holocaust Remembrance Standard?
I'm referring to the anti-BDS executive order.
Okay. Again, I think if asked for my opinion, I won't be able to tell you whether I was asked and what it is on those sorts of things.
Do you plan to issue a formal legal opinion on whether BDS-style contracting restrictions would withstand constitutional scrutiny under the First Amendment, the Commerce Clause, or federal preemption doctrines?
Again, I know it's not a satisfying answer, but under the rules of professional conduct, I have to apply the same standard to the mayor that I'm going to apply to you. If you ask me for advice, I'm not going to tell anybody you asked me for advice, and if I give you advice, I'm not going to tell anybody what I advised you of. That was one of the reasons why I left my law firm, to make sure that I could continue to practice law consistent with the rules of professional conduct. And I will be there for you if you've got a question for me, and I will promise, no matter what you ask me, I'm not telling anybody that you asked me something or what it was I told you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wong.
This is a follow-up question on Mr. David Levitin. The New York Times exposed that David Levitin required nonprofits renting his buildings to hire his maintenance company, and that's a violation of city bidding rules. And the Department of Investigations later documented how this arrangement likely violated city regulations, and this happened while you were commissioner of DHS. That means, my question is, that means Mr. David Levitin profited twice from rent and from the maintenance contracts. Question, were you aware of this arrangement?
No, we discovered it eventually, and we reported to DOI so that appropriate action could be taken.
Okay, thank you.
It was discovered because of terrific public servants on the front line of our agency. They flagged it for me, and we took appropriate action to address this problem.
And they're going to end it with Councilmember Caban.
Thank you. We're making you work hard today. Just moving the mic around. Okay, a few more. I want to ask you about the NYPD.
Apologies, I didn't hear that.
NYPD.
Okay.
The brand is strong. We're staying in the lane.
Elaine, both you and I are familiar.
That's right. So, the NYPD has a practice of unlawfully arresting people for low-level offenses, and then instead of issuing them DATs, those desk appearance tickets that are statutorily required by CPL 15020, the results of that has been that hundreds of New Yorkers are being subjected to the harms and dangers of remaining in extended police custody. Our state legislature has made it clear, right? They have determined that they should be able to return to court with a DAT to face these charges, and the impact of this is also very serious. We saw last year at least 5 New Yorkers died in NYPD custody. And so in the case of Douglas versus the city of New York, the NYPD is continuing to fight to maintain its practice of arresting people and then issuing those DATs only after they are held in detention at police precincts, rather than having the practice of issuing that ticket right where they're stopped or in the immediate area of which that stop takes place. So what are you going to do to ensure that the NYPD complies with the 15020 requirement that people receive those DATs in lieu of arrests?
I'm certainly going to take a look at Douglas, and I know we're talking more next week, so I'm sure we'll talk more about Douglas and other matters.
Great, thank you. I'm going to reference a couple more cases. So again, I know that you got to look at them, but I just...
That's what I'm here for.
Okay. So use and disclosure of sealed youth records. And this actually came up in a different context recently when we were exploring legislation around body-worn camera footage and allowing CCRB to get access. But what came out of those questions was essentially a concession that there is sort of a practice of kind of commingling and sharing information that should be sealed across different areas and agencies. And so we've been able to figure out that the NYPD has a practice of illegally accessing, using, and disclosing sealed records, including sealed youth records that are, whether they're juvenile arrest records that either resulted in a favorable determination or a decision not to prosecute or a dismissal or withdrawal of a petition or an adjustment of the case. And there's another case, NC versus City of New York, where the NYPD is fighting litigation to end that practice. What will you do to ensure that the NYPD complies with the Family Court Act's protections against disclosure of sealed records? Because, but like in some cases, what's happening is that disclosing these records to prosecutors, the NYPD is stripping young people of their presumption of innocence and confidentiality that the Family Court Act is designed to protect. So, like, what's the plan here?
When I became the Social Services Commissioner, I reviewed a lot of cases, and we settled a lot of cases. I will promise you I'll be taking a look at all of our cases. Where there's interest of the city to continue to litigate, we'll litigate. Where we should resolve the case, we'll resolve it.
Yeah. So maybe some new policies, some more oversight.
I hear you.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, and then just more broadly, I'm assuming that the approach will be the same to sort of ensure that the NYPD complies with state law protections against the disclosure of sealed criminal records generally.
I served with Jesse Tisch in the last administration. We worked very closely together, particularly during the pandemic. I know we will work very well together in my role, if you confirm me, and her role that she's already got.
Great. Thank you very much, and thank you for indulging me, Chair.
Of course. Well, seeing no other members have any questions, I want to thank Mr. Banks for taking the time to join us today, and now you're excused.
Thank you very much. I'm going to remain for any of the public comment.
Of course. And now we will move on to the public testimony at today's hearing. If you wish to testify and you haven't done it yet, please see the Sergeant at Arms to fill out an appearance slip. Just a quick reminder, all members of the public will have 2 minutes to speak. We're going to first start with Twyla Carter and Melanie Hartzog. That's fine.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Twyla Carter. I'm the Attorney-in-Chief and CEO of the Legal Aid Society, the nation's oldest and largest nonprofit law firm, which is also celebrating its 150th anniversary this year. I'm here today to express our full support for the confirmation of Steve Banks as New York City's new and next Corporation Counsel, a historic appointment as Mr. Banks would be the first person from the Legal Aid Society to serve in this role. Mr. Banks has spent his entire career standing up for New Yorkers who are overlooked and undervalued. He brings a deep understanding of these struggles, along with a relentless drive to turn advocacy into meaningful policy, helping to establish the nation's first right to shelter for people experiencing homelessness. As former Commissioner of DSS, Mr. Banks oversaw both the Department of Homeless Services and the Human Resources Administration. During his tenure, the city made meaningful progress in reducing the shelter system's general population and took decisive action to close the city's cluster sites, an expensive, poorly regulated model ill-suited to helping people move quickly and safely into permanent housing. He also implemented the first right to counsel program in housing court in the nation. He consolidated services, reduced barriers to benefits, expanded rental assistance programs, and often successfully worked to move bureaucracy in a compassionate direction. Given his experience and unique perspective on the challenges faced by the people and communities that we serve, if Mr. Banks is confirmed, we expect to see a law department that moves with that same conviction. We expect Mr. Banks to continue upholding the right to shelter for all New Yorkers, including our newest neighbors. In compliance with Emergency Executive Order 2, we await the opportunity to discuss consolidating the shelter system so that all New Yorkers have access to shelters offering the full array of amenities and services. We also look forward to him making significant progress toward ensuring that the shelter system is accessible to people living with disabilities in compliance with city, state, and federal law and the Butler Settlement. We would also expect Mr. Banks to enforce the City FEP's expansion and reform legislation duly enacted by the City Council to ensure that vulnerable, low-income New Yorkers can move out of shelter and remain stably housed in affordable apartments. We expect him to fully cooperate with the newly appointed remediation manager in Nunez versus City. We expect him to work toward eliminating the city's problematic and unconstitutional gang database, which is currently facing legal challenge, and to improve the deplorable conditions facing youth detained at the city's 2 juvenile detention centers, among other critical measures that reflect New York City's values. Finally, Mr. Banks' record gives us reason to expect leadership that is principled, progressive, and grounded in legal expertise. We hope and expect that Mr. Banks will use this role not to protect power for its own sake, but to advance the rights and well-being of the New Yorkers who need it most. That was his legacy at the Legal Aid Society, and it should be the standard he brings to this office. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. And now I'd like to call up Mr. McGuire and Mr. Kamutsu.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. My name is Brendan McGuire, and I'm a partner at the law firm Wilmer Hale. I recently served as the chief counsel to the mayor in City Hall from 2022 to 2023, and earlier in my career as an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York. I'm here today to express my strong support for Stephen Banks' nomination as Corporation Counsel. Steve and I got to know each other at a challenging time while we were arguably on opposite sides of a very complex crisis for the city, the influx of asylum seekers from the border. Steve was assisting legal aid in its negotiations with the administration about the response to the crisis, and in particular, the challenges posed by the city's right to shelter law. Suffice it to say, Steve and I had clients that had differing perspectives on the crisis, and he and I sometimes disagreed. But we always trusted that the other was operating in good faith, and we shared a commitment to forging a pragmatic and durable solution that was consistent with the law and the interests of all stakeholders. In the years after I left City Hall, we remained in touch and worked in private practice on a handful of pro bono matters together as well. I'd like to just highlight 3 qualities that, in my view, uniquely position Steve to serve the city at this critical moment. First, Steve understands both the art of advocacy and the value of compromise. The asylum seeker crisis was unprecedented in its urgency and its complexity. We spent many hours together navigating not only the legal landscape, but operational, policy, and political challenges. What distinguished Steve was not only the rigor of his legal analysis, but his instinct that meaningful solutions require listening, adjusting, and finding common ground. He knows how to argue forcefully, but he also knows how to solve problems. That combination is rare and is essential for the Corporation Counsel. Second, Steve appreciates that the Corporation Counsel is the lawyer for the city, not for the mayor or any particular elected official. He has worked with the law department and he has litigated against the city. He understands the requirements of the role. independence, communication, clarity of judgment, and a commitment to the city's legal obligations rather than political interests.
I'm sorry, Mr. McGuire, you could wrap it up.
I'll wrap up, thanks. In short, Steve Banks is the kind of lawyer our city needs as corporation counsel, a principled advocate, an independent counselor, and a committed defender of the public interest. Thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Tawaki Komatsu. Earlier today, I filed a motion in Komatsu versus City of New York, case number 21 CV 11115, in which Mr. Banks has been a defendant. That was a notice of appeal to get that case to the Second Circuit. This is a public hearing about the nomination of Mr. Banks. He's made false statements today, this hearing itself. There were many more council members in the room before I stepped up here to testify to people like you. So there's a case of Kate versus Giuliani that confirms that individuals have a right to speak, to communicate directly to government personnel. Where are they? So point of the matter is this, you guys talked about the First Amendment today. That's not being honored to my detriment. So with regards to today's public hearing, I'm going to ask the Second Circuit to void today's public hearing on the basis that it violated Second Circuit Judge Barrington Parker's decision in Kate versus Giuliani. Also, with regards to Mr. Banks, I had a conversation with him on August 24th, 2021, with regards to OTDA fair hearings. HRA has a legal duty to provide people who litigate matters against HRA with discovery prior to those fair hearings. I recorded the conversation I had with him on August 24th, 2021, in which he stated that he would not comply with my discovery rights. So with regards to that point,
Excuse me, sir, we do not allow the playing of audio or video at the witness table. Seeing no other people signed up to testify, the public hearing on this nomination is now closed, and it concludes today's business. I would like to thank again the nominee, the members of the public, my colleagues in this committee, the committee council, and staff